Shalom, shalom, friends, and blessings to you all in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Welcome to this episode of Un-Apologetics. I am your host, CJ Cox. I have my cameras off. Sorry, I got a little distracted by that. And this is the show where we are unapologetic about apologetics. Thank you guys very much for being here today. I am joined by Nakasuchi, the Raging Atheist.
Hey,
we are going to have a conversation today about homosexuality, and I believe this is probably going to focus primarily on topics like persecution and oppression. The reason I say that is because the catalyst for this was a tweet. And by the way, if I sound like I'm kind of rushing into it, I kind of am because I'm like 15 minutes late, so I apologize for that. But so the catalyst for this, to give everybody some background, was so I've been on a kick, if you will, on the LGBT issue, simply because I think it's topical. It's June, right? Pride Month. It's obviously generating clicks, all that kind of stuff, right? So I figure I would use this opportunity both on Twitter and on YouTube to talk about it. I don't know, Rage, if you've seen any of my last two videos on the issue. One is going after NIFB reprobate theology, and another is going after liberal theology about the word homosexual. So one you probably would have more approval of than the other, I'll be honest, but nonetheless. That, and then also, and I think this is the actual catalyst for this conversation, a tweet that I had made where I said, and I'm trying to remember offhand exactly what I said, but basically it was it was sort of a mocking thing saying, remember kids, if you like want to get some attention or something like that and glorify yourself, then do something that the majority of people find distasteful and then claim oppression. And it's a little bit better worded than that, but that was the general idea. Of course, tongue in cheek, not 100% serious, but also trying to make a point, which was that I felt that, number one, LGBTQ persecution is way overblown. And number two, that I find it somewhat arrogant, if I'm being honest, that all of us have to participate when, if I were to do the same, people would probably find me to be kind of bigoted, honestly. Like if I had a Christian Pride Month, for example, people would, and it forced all the different companies and all those different guys to get involved or otherwise face my wrath, people would probably have a problem with that. I have a feeling you might have a problem with that. And so that was the general point I was getting at.
I don't think Pride Month shuts anything down.
Well, and we'll of course get into that for sure. But that was my idea, right? That's the whole catalyst for why we're here. And then Rage, obviously, you are here to provide your own catalyst for why you're here, right? Obviously, that's what you were responding to, but go ahead.
Yeah, it was around that. Like, I think we got into somewhat of a little discussion, and you know me on Twitter. I'm not good at discussing on Twitter. I'll usually lose track and not respond. But it was somewhere around the lines of, you know, you felt like gay people aren't oppressed in America, or the oppression is overdone. I questioned you on it. So yeah, I thought, you know, we could start with our LGBTQ plus people is oppressed in America. And then if you want to move on to a broader topic on the issue, I've got time. I've got as long as you got.
For sure. And so with that then, I think that would be obviously the first question to probably address is, do I think that there is persecution in America for gay people? And the answer, I think, right now in my lifetime certainly is no. I, in fact, have experienced nothing but the exact opposite, namely people shaming me for not supporting things like homosexuality and stuff like that. Now, if I were to expand that to maybe say my grandfather's lifetime, I'm sure there's probably some things that were happening back in the 50s and 60s that were
probably your father's lifetime.
I could potentially see that. I guess I'm not just, my dad does tell, you know, his own version of his life, and obviously he only knows his own life, but he seems to have a recollection that's at least a little bit different. But I would say, at least in my lifetime, which is at this point 23 years, absolutely not.
All right, so let's start with like defining terms. What do you define oppression as?
Systematic in some way, usually, either by the culture or by the government itself. And it would be these groups of people, whether it be, like I said, the culture or the government itself, forcing another group of people to basically have less than human rights. because of their association with that group of people. So, like, for example, in a lot of Muslim countries, right, if you're an atheist, you're a homosexual, you're a Jew, you're a Christian, doesn't really matter. You get second-class citizens' rights. That would be, in my opinion, a form of oppression, and that could, of course.
Well, so if you Google oppression, you'll get a specific definition. Oppression means to prolong cruel or unjust treatment or control. Similar definition could be the state of being subject to unjust treatment or control, and then mental pressures or distress. And an example of that definition would be like, her mood had initially been alarm and oppression. So but would you agree? So I know, like, you're thinking of oppression as this, like, systematic, just out in the open. You're making a class of people feel like secondhand citizens. I'm not going to necessarily disagree with that, but I do want to kind of, when I did dispute your usage of the word oppression, I was thinking of it by the lines of definitions. Jill is in the chat. He knows I like to Google definitions on everything. So the moment you spoke oppression, I looked it up, and I was kind of appealing to that. But I am here prepared probably to argue for the oppression that you're talking about.
All right, and then so I would have another question that I guess I would want to get back at you, right? So at what point do you have things that are non-oppressive but rather inconveniences, right? So, for example, currently as it sits, I think there's a lot of issues when it comes to gay people adopting children. I would not consider that a form of oppression because you don't have a right to adopt children. That's not a human right. No, a single person doesn't have a human right. A person with a criminal record doesn't have that human right. It's just not a human right. Now, it's something we can discuss, but it's not an example of oppression, in my opinion, because it's not something that is like a legitimate human right that all people possess. And like I said, I just listed off other people who I think would be in that category as well. Would you consider that to be oppression, or would you consider oppression to be something worse than that?
I wouldn't consider it to be oppression. I would consider it to be discrimination, and I would consider it to be favoring religion. I think we're speaking about the most recent Supreme Court ruling dealing with Philadelphia and the Catholics there wanting to refuse to be able to give gay married couples children. Now, the same Catholic adoption service has in the past allowed gay people to adopt children, but their stance is that they're against gay marriage, and the Supreme Court just came down on their side. Not really surprising. There's been some surprising rulings from this new Supreme Court, but not surprising considering the way that this new Supreme Court has shifted towards the conservative side in the last 4 years. So I would consider it discrimination, not oppression. Now, when we're talking about the oppression that you're talking about, would you consider not having the right to just be yourself, or feeling comfortable to just be yourself? Wouldn't that be oppression? And I'm going to put it this way. Have you ever woken up a day in your life, a single day in your life, and been afraid somebody might kill you or beat you for being a cis male?
For being like straight or male, no, but for other things,
for that reason, for that one reason alone, because you are a straight male, your sexual orientation is cis male, you're straight, you like women. Have you ever feared for your life because of that?
No, I wouldn't say that at all. I would say there is certainly certain things about being a straight male that can be uncomfortable for sure. Obviously, with things like obviously there's a lot of positivity that comes out of going after sexual assault and stuff like that, and things that I even support. But obviously, as I'm sure you're even aware, as has even been experienced by people in this community, quote unquote, if you will, there is also a lot of skepticism about even talking to females as a straight male because of things like Me Too and stuff like that. But that's that's not like an oppression or me fearing for my life. It's just things can get uncomfortable sometimes. You know what I mean?
Well, and yeah, a different topic, more the result of equality for women and women being able to have equal say in society. We could have that discussion at another time. That'd be fascinating. But like, so it has always been the reality still to this very day, that when you come out of the closet as LGBTQ plus, I just lost a couple teeth, so I'm still getting used to speaking with this like hole in my mouth back there. But it's a fact of their lives that when they come out of that closet, and they walk around proudly just for being who they are sexually, as sexual beings, as the beings that they are, being proud of who they are, they take a risk of being physically harmed, beaten, or even killed. Would you agree with that?
I can honestly say I have seen only the exact opposite of that.
Really?
I see when people, in fact, I often tell this story. It's not really a story per se, but it's a lifelong observation of mine, starting from middle school. I
understand that you're young and you do come from an era where we have been actually starting to give rights to gay people, and you grew up in that era, so I am I do have an understanding of that, but I'll let you finish and then I'm going to get into you a bit.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and because the main point is kind of important for what I've lived here in my life, right? Starting from, like I said, middle school. In fact, really the tail end of elementary, so like 5th, 6th grade. I can actually count on a single hand women under 35 who I know who have not been seriously at some point in their lives bisexual or lesbian, meaning having sex with, having relationships with other women. Now, obviously, that's only women, but the point is that was like, it was to such a point of glorification that straight women, literally less than this number, in fact, the number is this number, in case anybody wants to know. That's obviously something that is skewed by my own experiences, and it's skewed by the generation I live in, and it's skewed by the fact that while I was in high school, I lived in a relatively affluent area and all that other kind of stuff. However, that is an actual fact of life that has occurred to me, and they were glorified constantly for it. And I was actually the one who was considered to be odd for having an issue with it. I won't say it was anything like violent or anything like that, but it was something where it was like, okay, that kid's weird. He has traditional understandings of marriage. And I can honestly say that's all I've ever had. And I've only ever seen my gay male friends be referred to as brave, becoming incredibly popular, courageous. If they have issues with their family, which has only been issues of the family is Christian, it's never been issues of disownership or violence. It's the family is Christian and they don't agree. It's always that the kid somehow is in the right, and the mother or father or whoever it happens to be is just this evil, vile bigot, when really all they've said is that they disagree with the lifestyle. And I can honestly say that is literally my only experience.
Really? All right. This will take me a while. So on June 24th, 1973, 32 people died of fire and smoke inhalation as the result of an arson attack on the Upstairs Lounge, a gay bar in New Orleans, Louisiana. Several men were assaulted on July 5th, 1978 by a gang of youths armed with baseball bats and tree branches in an area of Central Park in New York City known to be frequented by homosexuals. They later said that they committed that assault because they were homosexuals. Harvey Milk, the openly gay San Francisco city supervisor, along with Mayor George Moscone, were assassinated on November 27th, 1978 by political rival Dan White. That prompted the White Night riots, that was motivated by Harvey Milk coming out as gay and telling other people they should be coming out as gay. In March 1979, an assault on several women in a San Francisco lesbian bar by off-duty police officers drew national attention to the strained relationships between police and LGBT San Franciscans. Tennessee Williams was the victim of an assault in January 1979 in Key West, being beaten by 5 teenage boys. He escaped serious injury. The episode was part of a spate of anti-gay violence inspired by an anti-gay newspaper ad run by a local Baptist minister. Stephen Charles, 17, of Newark, was beaten to death in New York City on October 7, 1979. Let's go to November 18th, 1980, Ronald K. Crumpley, a former transit authority policeman, fired 40 rounds from a semi-automatic rifle and 2 Magnum pistols, all stolen from a Virginia gun shop, into a cluster of men standing in front of 2 gay bars. Charlie Howard was drowned in Bangor, Maine, 1984. Rebecca White was killed on May 13th, 1988, when she and her partner, Claudia Brenner, were shot by Stephen Roy Carr. James Zappalort, 1945 to 1990, a gay Vietnam War veteran, was stabbed to death. Paul Broussard, a Houston area banker, was murdered. U.S. Navy petty officer. I could go all the way down this list. This list doesn't include everybody. It stops at Pulse, the nightclub, and I'm sure you're aware of that. So when we're talking about people have been systematically over several generations in this country, since the inception of this country, honestly, having to hide themselves because they face repercussions from the society around them for being just who they are, I think by definition, that's oppression.
Well, I think there's a couple things that, excuse me, that I would want to point out with those. The first thing is...
I didn't get to the Stonewall riot, Richard Neal. Sorry, CJ. I'll get there eventually.
But the important thing, I think, there's two important things. I think the first one that is incredibly important to note is that all these popular examples, right, whether it's 73 or whether it's Stonewall or whether it's Harvey Milk, they're all in the 70s or 80s. Right?
No. I just pointed out the Pulse shooting, but I mean,
right. But I could get to
later.
Let's be honest here, though. The Pulse shooting was somebody from another culture, right, who came in and wanted to not just fight gay people, but fight our entire culture, right? So that was an attack on the United States in general from an Islamic terrorist who has a very explicit agenda of converting the entire world to Islam.
Who celebrated it, though?
Different, right?
Who celebrated that, though?
Well, that's not actually true. That's a misnomer. Now it is now. If you mean that Steven Anderson had said that there was like the
a lot of fundamental evangelicals have been celebrating that night shooting, but I mean, not all of this is the ancient past, CJ. That's what I'm talking. Like Matthew Shepard, that was within my lifetime. Mark Carson, a 32-year-old gay man, was shot to death by a man who trailed and taunted him as a friend as they walked down the street. Just in 2020, we had the highest reporting of homicides against transgender in the history of our nation since we started tracking these hate crimes, 44 in 2020 alone. And that's during the midst of a pandemic where everybody's fucking shut in. And that's just known cases, because a lot of these cases, there's a lot of cases out there that we just don't know. There's been a plague of transgender peoples coming up missing, especially black trans women here recently in this era. People still face violence. Yes, there are safe communities. That's something that the gay community has had to do. They started doing that after World War II, because what happened in World War II? Well, World War II, women were allowed to go into service, and they formed what was called the Women's Army Corps. And it was primarily made up of lesbians who were able to live and be themselves. They came back to our society, and they refused to go back to those gender norms. And great people along the way Walt Whitman would be one, started calling, LGBTQ plus people to come together and form safe zones for themselves, because they had to, because to do so and be isolated and to come out openly not too long ago in this country could result in violence against you, if not your death.
See, and excuse me. And this is where I get to my second important point, right? Is because so not only do I think there's, and obviously we're going to get to some of the newer ones like Steven Anderson and stuff like that in a moment. But the second, and I think very important point to point out here, right, is so, for example, would you consider...
and I do think it's a false narrative to try to paint that the shooter of the Pulse nightclub as somebody that didn't go into that club, like he had this beef with America. No, he clearly had a beef with gay people.
Right, but he also clearly had a beef with America. In fact, he said himself that he wanted attacks on the United States for multiple reasons because of their sinful nature, including but not limited to accepting homosexuality, but numerous other things as well. He was an Islamic terrorist, right? Like he had a specific religious ideology that is from without our culture, right? And was coming in as a conqueror, as an invader, not in this traditional sense. Obviously, they do it in a more individualized way, but that is their stated goal, whether it's ISIS, Al-Qaeda, all these other groups, right? And that is an important thing to point out. But the other thing, and this is, so would you...
I don't like America. If I were to go and like commit a mass shooting again in a church somewhere, kill a bunch of Christians, would you blame the fact that I don't like America, or would you blame atheism?
That
fact that I'm
actually
an
depends on
atheist.
your personal motivations. It would. If you went
Exactly.
and attacked the church,
Exactly, dude.
but that's exactly my point, right? If your motivations were to attack the church because you wanted to attack the United States and because you felt America was a Christian nation and this was just one of many ways you felt you could attack the United States, then absolutely I would blame whatever your ideology was. But if you attacked the church simply because it was a church and that was it, for example, much like the what was that shooting that just recently happened, the one against the Asian people.
Dude, there's been so many recently. Like you might not. I get all the feeds. So every time there's a mass shooting, I know they kind of get blurry because they happen like every day.
But so there was a real popular one though. A guy who he said he was like sex addicted and he shot like 8 women.
I can't remember. Yeah, I think it's tickling my memory, but I can't remember the specifics.
Well, the point is that he doesn't have some sort of outside political or religious ideology that is actually leading him to do it. He was shooting at these, he said, because of a sex addiction. But whatever it happens to be, whether it's anti-Asian hate or it's a sex addiction or a combination of both, the point is it was not linked to any ideology, right? So his shooting is going to be looked at as different, in my opinion, than the shooting of somebody who has a ideology that they're coming out with, trying to propagate that against a certain group of people, against a nation.
There's been plenty of shootings of these clubs. Like I said, like that, you're pointing to one specific instance where this Muslim did it, but it's like, what's the difference between their thoughts on homosexuality and the Christian thought on homosexuality? Absolutely none, right?
Absolutely not. That's entirely incorrect. In fact, I just did an hour-long video refuting the NIFB on their very Islamic view on homosexuality.
Not all Muslims think that you should put homosexuals to death.
Well, frankly, if they don't, that's their problem because the Quran says so.
Well, I mean,
and
the Bible says so.
Right,
so
but
it would be your problem.
You got to actually let me explain the point.
Well, yeah,
right?
Please finish because you're not being consistent here.
I'm being totally consistent. And frankly, I have to be clear. This is something that I don't think, as a former Christian, you really should not make this error because it's a very elementary error. If I could just be blunt, I'm not being insulting, but I need to be blunt about it. The Christian Bible very clearly lays out that all human beings are worthy of death. Read the reprobate mind chapter again, right? And what does it say? It says that being disobedient to your parents is worthy of death, that being a debater, meaning somebody who argues for the sake of arguing, not just the concept of debate, but nonetheless, that is worthy of death, that being malicious is worthy of death, that being a liar is worthy of death, that being an adulterer is worthy of death, with which Matthew 5:28 says is even looking upon another woman with lust. So what's the point? Is the point for us to go literally exterminate the entire human race? No. The point is for human beings to understand their sinful nature and to, number one, seek a savior, and number two, show forgiveness and compassion to their fellow sinner, understanding that they themselves are sinners. This is why Jesus gives the parable of, God forgave you of a small debt, and then you go out, or of a large debt rather, and then you go out and hold your brother accountable for a small debt. That's not how it works, right? If God forgives you for a large debt, you have to be willing to forgive your brother the small debt. So, yeah, absolutely, the Bible does say that homosexuality is worthy of death. It also says mouthing off to your parents is worthy of death. The point is not to go kill all of these people, as Jesus and Paul and others clearly stated. The point is to get you to seek a savior, right? And again, that is very basic Christian theology. Every Christian group, with the apparent exception of the NAFB, I guess, adheres to that, including groups I don't even consider Christian, like Mormons and Catholics.
That doesn't make much sense, but whatever. So we're focusing on this one nightclub shooting that you want to just put out. Oh, that's a Muslim dude. But like I said, I literally could go through this entire list. Are you going to say that every one of those were Muslims with a Muslim ideology? No, dude.
No, like I said, there's a two-pronged thing there. The first thing is I think that it's important to note that most of these are quite far in the past, before I was even born, before anybody in my generation was born, right? And
you're quite far in the past. You're acting like this is antiquated past. 1978 wasn't that long ago. The 80s, the 90s, that wasn't that long ago. All right, so is it ancient past? So would you consider? And again, I'll preface that we started that line of thought with you stating that you've never had to wake up feeling like your life was in danger or you might have physical violence for being a cis male in this country. And I hear you're trying to justify, but you're not putting two and two together here. But when you talk about oppression, and you would have to say, if you're not being oppressed, as you said, secondhand citizen, then you would have equal rights under the law, right?
Yeah.
All right. So if you're trying to say this is all antiquated past, not in your lifetime, DOMA was in your lifetime when Bill Clinton signed DOMA into law, stating that marriage was between a man and a woman, and that and practically outlawing homosexuality, homosexual marriage in this country. And then it wasn't until 2013, the first time, but really in 2015, that the Supreme Court overruled that. So you're talking like this is ancient past. We're talking 5 years ago, or 5 to 6 years ago at this point, that these people even got the right to have, when it comes to marriage alone, equality. And your side, the conservative Christian side, is trying to take that back, yank that back. That's not even settled law at this point, because as far as I know, you could use one of a number of any cases that are trying to make its way up to the Supreme Court to try to overturn that decision. So you just stated that oppression would be not having equality under the law, and that this is all ancient history, and yet it's not, CJ.
Well, there's a couple things I think that I'd want to point out there too, and the most important one is that I think that there's a fundamental misunderstanding of what I mean by equality. Equality, as in your rights as a person. Now, I will be clear, and I've been clear.
You don't get rights as people when you marry.
Do you believe that you have a right to polygamy or to an incestuous marriage?
I mean, not my thing. I don't take a position on it.
Well, so the reason I ask is to make a very specific point, right? It's not even to compare the two things. It's to say that we kind of accept as a general rule that there are certain parameters that we accept as marriage and that we don't.
Are you comparing homosexuality to incest and polygamy?
In a sense, yeah, because it's grown adults who are willingly, consensually getting into a union with each other and saying that they do so because of love. Why should the state tell them no, according to your logic?
I definitely believe that's a false equivalency fallacy, dude.
Why?
We're talking about incest and we're talking about polygamy. Two very different things from people's sexuality. Incest we've deemed a crime, and I believe in most states polygamy has been deemed a crime, right? So
why
you're literally arguing that if you're going to equivocate the two, you're arguing that homosexuality should be a crime.
Now, I don't think homosexuality should be a crime. I've stated numerous times before, and I was actually just about to say, I don't believe the state should have, I don't think I need a marriage license as a straight male. I think that's ridiculous. I think the state should not be involved in those at all. I think it should be done by the private sector, which in this case would be religious bodies, and there are plenty of religious bodies that will marry gay people, so if they want to, go right ahead. I don't care. However, I am making the point that in polygamy and in incest, you have two consensually, what is the word? Consensual. Are you just giving consensus? There's some kind of a word, or giving consent, right? Adults entering into a union willingly with each other because of the way that they feel about each other, right? And you're saying that you think that's wrong because the state made it a crime. Well, the state made homosexuality a crime. So what's your point?
I never said that I stated that it was wrong. I said I don't take a position on it. It's not my thing.
You see my point, though, right? Like here you have this one thing, and you think this one thing is at least weird.
No, I see that you're trying to get away from the issue of homosexuality and put it off on incest and polygamy.
It's making a very clear point. The argument for people is that there's nothing wrong with it because it is two consenting adults entering into a willing bond with each other because they love each other. Is that not the argument?
No, the argument is that they're human beings. They're entitled to the same rights that you have as an individual. When you're talking about polygamy, there's power structures there. I don't really have I have no issues with a polyamorous relationship. Consenting adults can do what they do. But when you're talking about polygamy, it's usually within a religious setting where there's power structures, and it's often more times than not men with several wives dominating over them, right? Like that's pretty much why it was outlawed or whatever. I'd have to really look into Mormonism in America to figure out probably why we outlawed polygamy in America. I haven't really went that far into it. When you're talking about incest, there's plenty of scientific data that suggests that that's not a good thing to do. You're going to have a lot of problems with that. We're talking about two very different things here, and I understand that you want to take it to polygamy, you want to take it to incest. That's often what Christians do. They try to conflate it. You know, at least you're not Matt Powell conflating it with pedophilia like Matt Powell does. But it's essentially the same thing, and it's the same thing that you're trying to do when we're talking about the oppression of gay people, not the oppression of polygamists, not the oppression of people that commit incest. We're here today to talk about the oppression of gay people.
Yeah, I understand that, but you are, and I'm sorry to say it, but you're missing a very big point here, right?
I get your point, and I understand why you're trying to go there, but you're dodging my question. You know, you said equality under the law, sure. And you said secondhand citizens, sure. And we're just talking about one issue of marriage here. We already talked about the physical violence, which you try to get away with that with the whole Muslim thing. I understand that. Like, I was hoping that this conversation could be a no-brainer for you, that you could clearly see that this, and I understand that you're on the other side and you're one of the oppressors, in my opinion. People like you know, people that have your religion, people that have your biases against these human beings, and you want to conflate them to these bad connotations. That's the argument you're trying to make, CJ. It just doesn't work with me. I'm here to talk about homosexuals.
No, because you just explained to me explicitly that you missed the point. And I'm sorry to say, but that's just true, right? The point is not to say, well, X, Y, and Z is bad, therefore being gay is also bad, right? That's not what I'm saying. You just said that no, the argument is that they're entitled to the same human rights, meaning you're assuming that marrying somebody is a human right. You're making that claim, right? When you make that claim, how are you then going to defend against somebody who says, okay, well, I fell in love with two women or two men. Polygamy can go both ways. I want to marry both of them. Why is that not my right? They consented. They're adults, right? If we you brought up the science stuff with incest, nobody's talking about children. Nobody has brought up children at any point in time. In fact, Lawrence Krauss has famously said that he believes that a brother and sister, if they love each other and agree not to have children, it should be legal. My point that I'm saying here is the argument for this being a human right is that two consenting adults have the right to be in a union with each other when they love each other. Is that not correct? Is that not your argument for why this is a human right?
I don't think I ever said it was a human right. We're talking about equality under the law.
Okay, but if we're talking about equality under the law, we're specifically talking about your rights, right?
No,
we're not talking
not
about like being equal to do absolutely every single thing.
Not necessarily. I don't have. So you're trying to derail this conversation and justify your way out of being inconsistent here, because you just said it.
It's 100%.
So if it's not a right, CJ, then why does Christians go around screaming about their rights being infringed, their spiritual bullshit being infringed, because now we allow gay people to be married? If it's not a right, why does your side care so much about them being able to do it?
Well, that would have to be kind of a different conversation in a way. Simply
no. The different conversation is polygamy and incest. That's the different conversation.
Let me explain my point.
Holy fuck, dude!
Let me explain my point, okay? Because I don't understand how you're not getting this. It's very clear.
I get exactly what you're trying to do. I understand what you're trying to do. It's not the first time a Christian has tried to do it, CJ. It's old. It's an old play. I'm just not going to play it. I'm here to talk about LGBTQ plus rights and their oppression. You're trying to deny that they're oppressed. Okay, I'm giving you examples of clear oppression.
Right. Okay. So now I'm not putting words in your mouth, even according to you. You just said being married is a right. Why?
I just said LGBTQ plus rights.
Why?
I said that.
We're talking about being married, though. Why?
So now you want to get hung up on whether or not marriage is a right. That's not what we're here to discuss.
Okay, then that's not them having their rights taken away. If that's not a right,
I understand you want to get hung up on all these on all these positions right now. I really do. I understand that, CJ. But just get to my question. You try to put this in the ancient past, like this doesn't happen in your lifetime. And you tried
to put this in the future by saying Christians and conservatives and all that didn't give them the right to marry until 2015. But you have no argument for their right to marry even being a right in the first place.
You have no right for them not to have the right to marry.
I've already granted to you I don't believe in marriage licenses. So
but you're denying their oppression. It doesn't.
Oppression. Why?
All right, CJ, chill out. I understand you're frustrated. All right, I understand. You can take your position. We're arguing. And not does CJ oppress gay people? We're arguing, are gay people oppressed in America? Right? You can have your position. You can think they can get married all they want, but the unfortunate fact is they couldn't, and it was actually signed into law under DOMA. Under Bill Clinton, a Democratic president, that they couldn't. They had to fight for that right back because you do get benefits with marriage in this country, CJ. That would be a right.
So you believe taking away people's right to marry is oppression. Is that correct?
That's not what this conversation is about. In just a second.
It is 100%.
I need a second. My daughter's knocking.
Sorry, go ahead. All right. In the meantime, I'll just go ahead and say I have 2 videos in the past that are on this, not in the past, in the recent past on this issue. If you guys are interested, I'll just go ahead and sort of point those out right now while we have some time. So the first video I did was on the claim that the word homosexual is not in the Bible. Second video I did was on NIFB reprobate theology. So if you guys are interested in that, it looks like Rage is back, so we'll go ahead and get back to the conversation. But just wanted to fill in the dead air there.
All right, so real. I mean, the point of this marriage thing is not whether people should have the right to get married. I personally, I don't agree. I don't believe in marriage, CJ. I don't give a fuck if anybody gets married. I don't think they should. I don't think you need some legal paper and I think a lot of times men use that status as, oh, I own this other person now, that she's mine. I don't believe in none of that shit. I don't care about it. The fact is, we're talking about oppression of a particular people, not pedophiles, not polygamists, not people that commit incest, LGBTQ plus people. That's what we're talking about, right? And when we're talking about their oppression, and you're saying it's antiquated history now because, you know, you're a young dude and you can't see beyond, you know, your experience here. And I'm pointing out that in 2015, they just got this particular right, gay marriage. You might get triggered by that term, me calling it a right, but the fact is they didn't have it. Now they do. Your side's trying to take that away. By your own definition of what oppression is, what we started this stream is. I just won.
You only won if that is an example of oppression. But as I'm trying to point out to you, if that's an example of oppression, you're not even consistent with yourself, right? Because you recognize that's why I'm bringing up things like incest and polygamy. It has nothing to do with saying somebody who is committing homosexuality and somebody who is committing incest are doing an equal thing. That is not the point, okay? The point is, well,
you want me to say that. That's your point. And no, I'm not here to talk about that. You made the claim that homosexuals aren't oppressed. I just gave you a clear example, and then you made it, well, maybe back in the antiquated past. I would say that I'm probably your father's age. You try to put it on your you try to make it like it was super long ago. Oh, that's 2 generations ago. No, at its worst, it was just my time 1 generation ago. I mean, we haven't even gotten to AIDS of the 80s and 90s yet. I mean, this is just another example of oppression. I'm not using this as my only one by any means. I started with violence. I started with just feeling like if I come out of the closet, and I know Maddox is waiting for me to come out of the closet. Sorry, Maddox, I'm a cis male, like CJ is. Now we're at this Supreme Court decision and Christian conservative attempts to try to take that away. But then I'm going to take it back to the 80s and 90s, and we'll talk about the AIDS epidemic and how they were denied health care and how many thousands, if not millions of people died because of that. How this disease was able to propagate because of that. I mean, we haven't even gotten to the good stuff yet, dude.
Okay, but you're still completely blowing past the point. You can't on one end say this is a right that's being taken away. It's oppression. And then in the same breath say, I'm not here to talk about whether or not this is the right and it's oppression. Like, that's not how this works. Either you're not prepared to talk about it, in which case we just kind of have to defer.
I don't defend the oppression of polygamists and people that commit incest. That's not what I'm here to talk about. And I'm not here to equate the two. We're talking about marriage. We're talking about marriage, and you don't want to call it a right. I mean, it's all over your. Why deny one couple versus another couple? Tax implications, visitation in hospitals, and many other things are associated with marriage in the U.S. Like, this is not hard to understand. I've never been married. I know you probably have never been married. But certain benefits come along with marriage, right? And if Christians have that right, and if Christians can get those benefits and gay people can't, that's oppression, CJ.
No, it isn't. It's not. You have to make the argument that you have a right under the state to be married, and you can't do that. And every time I bring up another example, I'm not prepared to do that. So you can't sit here and tell me you can't have X.
Do people get married in states?
Yes, they do.
So is there not a right to be married? What are you even talking about?
No, you do not have, under the state, you do not have a legal right to be married to
so only Christians can do it, CJ. Only Christians can do it. And you can't see how that makes you any fucking different. Oh my fucking God.
That has nothing to do with religion. You're trying to make a very specific argument.
So why can't gay people? What is this issue with gay people doing it then?
Well, so in my personal view, obviously, that's going to
when you make a law saying they can't do it and other people can. I mean, we're not talking about pedophiles or polygamists or none of that other shit. We're talking about gay people. There was a specific law saying these people cannot do this that you can do. You're saying, well, that doesn't make you a second-class citizen?
No, it does not. It does not. Okay, and I just proved it by saying that so do you think polygamists and people who fall in love with their brothers and sisters are second-class citizens? Are you willing to say that right now?
Say what?
Are you willing to say that people who want to have polygamous marriages and people who want to have incestuous marriages are second-class citizens? Just be consistent. That's all I'm asking. Do you think they're second-class citizens?
I don't take a position on it.
Exactly. You're not willing to discuss whether or not marriage is a right.
I'm not here to discuss that, CJ.
Then don't use it as an argument.
Use what as an argument? I didn't use an argument about polygamists getting married or incels getting married. You did.
Marriage is a right. If marriage is a right for them, it's a right for all people who fall under the same category, which is consenting adults entering into a willing bond. If consenting adults enter into a willing bond, that's the argument you're using. Okay? That's literally the argument you're using. If that's not the argument you're using, then there are other parameters that make a marriage acceptable, which you yourself are granting. Why do you not allow me to grant that then?
No, you're trying to conflate this with other shit.
It's not a conflation. It is very
can Christians get married in the United States?
So can atheists.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with religion.
Do they get certain benefits from that marriage?
Oh, yeah, you can get some benefits from marriage, for sure.
All right. We're not talking about the other shit. Why shouldn't gay people get those benefits? You're sitting here saying that they're not oppressed. You know, they got the same shit as everybody. And now that they do technically, although some states are going out of their way to make sure that it's not happening in their state, right? You're trying to equate this to other people, and well, my position's inconsistent, and we're here to talk about your position, not mine. You're the one that made the statement that gay people are not oppressed. This is just one of my examples, CJ. Just one of them.
Okay, but if you're not again, this is not difficult. If you're not prepared to argue how marriage is a right, then you are not able to use marriage as an example of taking away rights. That's the first thing. Hang on, I gotta get this up.
God damn it.
If you want the state to actually be involved, then the state's only reason to be involved would be the propagation of the next generation, which homosexuals by definition can't do. So it makes perfect sense for the state to regulate it.
It makes perfect sense for the state. I wasn't listening. Repeat that last part.
Yeah. So if the state is to regulate, which again, I don't believe they should, but if they are, their only reason to regulate would be for the propagation of the next generation, which homosexuals by definition cannot do. So if they're going to regulate, of course this would be something they would regulate. And for the exact same reasons that they would regulate other things, such as incest. And again, I know you want to not go to those categories, but you have to. The logic demands that
I don't
you
equate the
address those other
two. I
categories.
understand that you're religious and you demonize these people and you equate them to what
Has nothing to do with
connotation.
demonizing.
So do you think that polygamists should get married?
I don't believe in marriage licenses, so they can do whatever they want, in my opinion. I don't think they should, though. I'm opposed to polygamy. I find it to be sinful. But in my perfect America, we would not have marriage licenses. And if the Mormon Church wants to marry them, go whatever.
Do you think people that commit incest should get married?
Same thing. I don't believe in it. I think it's a sin. I think it's wrong. I think it's evil. However, if there is a religious body that wishes to marry them, fine. I don't think the state should get involved.
Do you think gay people should be married?
Same argument.
So what's the issue here?
Well,
All right. So let me reframe that. So, do you understand that there's a push from your religion that says differently than what you just said?
oh, of course. In fact, my most recent video before this, it wasn't exactly about taking away marriage rights, but it was going after the NAIFB because they want to, as you know, execute homosexuals, which I'm thoroughly opposed to.
Yeah. But we're not talking about execution. We're just talking about marriage, and I'm going to move on from marriage. We're going to agree to disagree on marriage, I believe. You want to take it to a part. So me personally, I do not believe that polygamists should be married. Like I said, there's power dynamics there, and I labeled that out. I do not believe that people committing incest should get married, or should be able to get married, because I think it's, there's scientific reasons why that shouldn't happen, outside of just the social norms that we grow up. I think that if Christians and atheists, we can get married and we can have these certain benefits, that gay people are no different than that. Now, I know you want to try to equate gay people to those other things. I do think that, like, when you're talking about polyamorous relationships, and that's a different power dynamic, as compared to like polygamy, when we're truly talking about consenting adults, no indoctrinations telling a woman that, she's not as good as the man, and the man, blah, 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 blah. Most polyamorous relationships that I know about, and I've known in my, several people in my life now that have been in them, I'd let them get married. I'd say that, yes, those people are probably oppressed in the same manner that I'm saying that gay people are oppressed, right? Because I don't see how you can equivocate the two of those together. Now, I understand. I can see how you do it from your Christian frame of mind. You think that it's a sin, right? And you equate it to other sins. But I don't believe in sin. I think that if a certain group of people can be entitled to certain rights and others can't, by definition, those others are second-class citizens, right? I mean, you have to agree with that. If you don't agree with that, CJ, then I just really don't know what I can do for you when it comes to this issue.
All right, well, so I'll say one more thing, and then I do want to move on to another, just because I don't want to. We've already gone 48 minutes. I'm sure we'll go longer than my typical hours, because we always do. But just want to get to some of the other topics. So my point in everything that I'm trying to say, it's not to equivocate them all as sinners per se. Otherwise, I would have used other examples. I could use an adulterer, or I could use and in fact, as a Christian, just to be clear, in case anyone thinks that there is some specific anti-gay rhetoric coming out here, I personally see homosexuality the same way I see every other sin, literally all of them. I don't find it to be especially bad or especially good in any way, right? So just to make that part clear, right? But my point is trying to address the fundamental logic behind claiming such and such a thing is a right, and not having such and such a thing makes you a second-class citizen, right? My argument is very simply that if it is the case that disallowing consenting adults to enter into a willing bond with each other is relegating them to a status of second-class citizens, then we have to upend our entire marriage system. It's not just homosexual. We got to upend everything. And we have to seriously discuss what the age of consent is too, because in numerous states that is 16 or 15. So do they also have a right to marry whoever they want? And the point there I'm making is, again, not to conflate the two things themselves, right? But to say there is a fundamental logic here. And by the way, you did just ask me, right? Well, what do you feel about polygamy, incest, all those things? And not to toot my own horn, but I did give a consistent answer. I said, I disagree. I find them to be evil and sinful. However, I don't believe in marriage licenses. And if there is a religious body that wishes to marry those people, that's on them. It's not on the state. It's not on me. You, on the other hand, seemingly want the state to allow some but disallow others. Let's not even put a name on the others. Let's just disallow others. Why, if marriage is a right?
No, I'm not. So you're trying to. So I know you're trying to put me there, but it's not atheists trying to disallow people from being able to marry, CJ. It's Christians.
So would you then agree that other groups that we don't allow? You have to see the consistency here.
No,
right?
Oh my God, dude.
I don't understand.
You just beat this dead horse. You just have to beat it and beat it and beat it, and you're not going to get off of it. All right, so just are Christians in this country trying to take gay people's right to marriage?
Sure, some of them are.
So why are you saying that I'm the one that's doing that?
Because I feel like I'm going to just repeat myself over and over again.
Because I don't have a position on whether polygamists should be married. I'm trying to stop polygamists. I am literally actively trying to stop polygamists from getting married, CJ. That's what you're saying.
You did earlier say that you thought that they should not, right? When you asked me,
I have a thought, but how is that?
Fine.
How is that me? How is that me stopping them from getting married?
Because if you would in any way support what the state currently says, which is that they cannot, then you, by your logic, are relegated.
Is there some push to allow polygamists to be married?
Of course. You ever heard of the FLDS?
Yeah. I disagree with them fundamentally, sure.
Yeah, exactly. And you have every right to. I don't think that there's necessarily.
But in that that's more of an issue of Utah, right?
That's certainly in Utah. Yeah, it's also a big thing here in Idaho because there's lots of Mormons in Idaho as well.
So because I'm not propagating that Mormons should have this power dynamic over their wives, because I don't fight for their right to marry 10 women. I should be consistent and not be for the rights of gay marriage.
Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. If you don't believe that consenting adults should be able to get into a polygamous marriage.
That's just not how life is, dude.
That is exactly how it is.
No,
it's exactly how it is. It's a matter of consistency. And if you don't understand the matter of consistency, that's fine. But
the matter of consistency here is that you keep trying to skate and obfuscate what we're talking about. Like, I'm talking about violence. You go to the Pulse nightclub and it's just a Muslim. Now I'm talking about marriage and how this is an ancient, antiquated history of gay people fighting for their rights. And you're like, well, God damn it, you like fucking polygamists and you don't want them to get married and you don't like people that commit incest. No, that's not what we're here to talk about.
But it is in the sense that you
it's
are now
in the sense, in your sense of that you have to justify your way and try to get away from it.
No, it's not that.
The clear fact, the clear thing that you can see with your own eyes, that gay people just don't have the rights that you Christians have had in this country.
Well, again, first off, you're conflating Christianity.
No, I mean, do you know what rights come along with marriage in this country? Do you know what rights come along with marriage?
Firmly aware.
So you understand, hospital visitations, like if somebody were to die next to kin issues, there's so many issues involved with marriage that give you certain benefits in this country, whether you not like the system or not. I don't like the system of marriage in this country, CJ. You don't like licensed marriages. I don't give a shit about marriage. But when a certain class of citizens, Christians, and you're going to put atheists in there, right? Whatever. I don't know. I mean, a lot of gay people are atheists too, right? So not all atheists can get, not all atheists, and the point is they now can do this. But the point of this whole thing was this was just recently where they attained this, let's not call it a right, a privilege. right? Is that better for you? A privilege?
That's perfectly fine. Yeah.
All right. So just recent, not antiquated history. That's the whole point of this. And I know you want to go to, you didn't quite do what the Matt Powells do and equate it to, oh, they're just a bunch of fucking pedophiles. You didn't go there, but I mean, it was close, but you didn't go there. So let's just move on. All right. Would you say that if you have an entire institution in this country, and not an entire institution, not all Christianity is going after gay people and saying the things Matt Powell and them say, but fundamental evangelicals in their lobby and the Republican Party incessantly spreading propaganda about a certain group of people, utilizing hatred against a certain group of people. Wouldn't you label that as oppression?
So yeah, I mean, if there was a group that was actually trying to institutionalize hatred against another group of people, I would say that group was certainly trying to oppress that group of people.
National Prayer Breakfast.
They're trying to do that, though.
The National Prayer Coalition, they have a National Prayer Breakfast every year. They fundamentally have, they go state by state through red states mainly, but they go through it all the states with their bullshit. I can point to George Bush in 2004 and his campaign against gay marriage, again, propagating hatred against a certain people to win an election so he can retain power. And the right wing just propaganda that flew starting 2 weeks before the Democratic nomination that year, purely anti-gay propaganda to motivate a religious base against this certain group of people.
Well, no, because first off, I don't think that there is a proper understanding of those things. I would say that the National Prayer Breakfast is absolutely not homophobic. Homophobic very clearly means to hate a group of people, and being against a certain practice is not hating a group of people. For example, you, as noted by your name, the Raging Atheist, are against Christianity. You think it's something that's bad, right? That doesn't mean that you hate Christians. It doesn't mean you want Christianity to be illegal. It just simply means that you oppose the practice. Right? It's not the same thing. So that's the first thing to point out. Second thing to point out is, again, if they're going around making claims about marriage, I wouldn't support getting the state involved in marriage. However, there is no, and if we do equate the word privilege, the reason I'm okay with equating the word privilege is because now you remove this from being an example of oppression into an example of, for example, you have a certain privilege if you own property. You have certain privileges if you're above a certain age, like at the age of 35, you can run for president. Those aren't rights, though, right? And not having those things doesn't make you an oppressed person. Not
having the privileges of other people, that doesn't make you an oppressed person.
Absolutely not. Am I oppressed right now since I can't run for president?
I don't get it.
So
I'm of age and I can't run for president. No, I don't think I'm oppressed.
Okay, so that's an example.
Although I guess I could consider it a form of oppression, considering I committed a crime when I was 17, and because of that one act, I can't run for president. So yeah, I guess that could be oppression.
So what about for me in particular, though? Because with me, it's an age thing, right? I'm not 35, so I can't run. Is that oppression?
No, nobody can run until they're 35.
Is it oppression for me to not be able to rent a car until I'm 25?
I don't get your point.
My point is that I, as an adult, have certain things, certain privileges that I don't have the ability to do, but that doesn't make me an oppressed person.
Sure.
Exactly. There you go. Right. So
again, this was just one example. You agreed to both of the premises. So when I first, the first thing was violence. You've never had to wake up and fear for your life just for being cis, obfuscated, and then you agreed like if one group of people has certain rights, we'll say rights in this instance. I still think I think marriage is a right. I think that's why Christians fight so hard for it. Is Christians really fighting to hold on to what they see as their rights? And for you to sit here and deny that is just really insane to me. But we'll get beyond that. You obfuscated. So once again, now we're here. And it's just it's always trying to justify each point by point, which is what you was trying to do. I'm not here to try to get you to see homosexuality as not a sin. Just mainly to understand that, yes, whether you agree with whether or not they should be oppressed, that, I mean, it's pretty obvious to see that this group of people in particular have been oppressed. Maybe not on a grand scale like you would imagine. You haven't been around when it was really at its hardest. You know, you don't remember the Matthew Shepard story and what happened there, or all the other stories that was before and after. But still to this very day, people are waking up and they're afraid to be who they are because their parents might kick them out of their house. They might lose their job. I don't think that happens too often anymore. I think we are more accepting, but there's definitely places, especially if you're a transgender person. I think that it is sometimes really hard to keep your job or find a job. We have actively right now people trying to take transgenders, people's right to become the opposite sex. I can't think of the word right now for it. For the surgery, trying to get transgender people out of the army, out of the military. I mean, there's always these attacks on this particular group of people, and we've come a long way in the last 10 years, but it's been very recent, and we're still fighting for it, and nothing is established yet. It's too new to be established. So I just don't understand how you can sit here and say they're not oppressed. I would fully expect you to say, as a Christian, they are oppressed and they should be, and that would be different. But you're just trying to justify your way out of each of my points that would show clear oppression. And that's going by your terminology, not the actual definition of what oppression is. Because again, the actual definition of oppression, and I'll get the right words: prolonged, cruel, or unjust treatment or control, the state of being subject to unjust treatment or control. Unjust treatment would be to give this group benefits under marriage and not that group. That would be unjust treatment. Control would be for a Christian lobby to say, that you can't get married because you're gay. You're sitting here trying to say that you don't think that the National Prayer lobby is homophobic. Like, do you even understand what they try to do in Uganda? Do you know what they try to do in Uganda?
So I'm not super familiar with African politics.
They tried using their American influence and their power and resources. They tried to get Uganda to pass legislation that would execute gay people.
Well, I mean, I'd have to look into that, honestly, because I've heard a lot of people
You
say
probably
stuff
should.
like that, and don't get me wrong, I'm not going to deny it, because sometimes people say stuff like that, and it's true, like with the whole Make America Straight Again conference. But sometimes people say that, and it's outright false. Like everybody says that Mike Pence is down with electroshock therapy of gays. That's not true. This is false.
Look into it. Clearly true.
For sure.
I don't believe it was passed in Uganda. I think it was close. And I don't think they're done trying. But yeah, I mean, this is just true. This same lobby has propagated for the last 10 years, since gay people actually started to get their rights, started to get some equality under the law, which is something very new in your lifetime, CJ. So for you to pretend like this didn't happen, this happened in your grandfather's lifetime, is just ludicrous. But this particular lobby for the last 10 years, just propagating that this one particular group, evil, bad, and you agree with it. I know you do. That's not what this conversation is about, though. And I'm not trying to attack you in that. I've come to a place that I understand, attacking your beliefs and how you see homosexuals isn't gonna work. I just have to try to make you see the oppression. Once you can see the oppression, whether or not you're for it, that's going to be on you as you grow as a human being. But to make a statement like, I don't believe that homosexuals are oppressed, I have to question the reality you live in.
All right, so let's see because obviously this will kind of go back into the whole whether or not you have a right to have marriage conversation, and I do want to move away from that a little bit because that has been the first hour of the show. So let me go ahead, and I will, again, look into that Uganda thing. I apologize for the skepticism, but I have very often been lied to by people on this thing. And I'm not saying
I don't lie. I don't lie. I could be misled. I could have false information. Yeah, please research it for yourself. Yeah, but I try to always come from a place of truth.
Absolutely. I just want to point that out, right? So I'm not accepting it, but I'm just not prepared to argue it. So I'm going to look into it, right? The avoiding the marriage conversation again. Do you see how do I want to word this? So let's say that I decided to dedicate December as Christian Pride Month, right? And I had every single December, the entire world.
I mean, it pretty much is that anyway, ain't it?
I mean, you could say, I guess, Christmas, but I mean, Christmas is such a secular holiday at this point.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a Christian holiday, and Christians trying to take it back, right? Like, but it's still the whole purpose of the country shutting down, and it's not just that day or that few days or that week that people are off, right? It's like that whole month from Thanksgiving. Once Thanksgiving's over, you're leading up to Christmas, and yeah, you're still working, but like people are still working during Pride Month. You know, like. You could literally say December is Christian month in this country. Come on, CJ.
I mean, you could if you were abusing the language, right? Because
not really.
You celebrate Christmas, you're not a Christian. Most of the world is not. In fact, I would even argue, at least in America, the majority of Christians are not celebrating Christmas as a religious holiday.
I definitely agree with you. It's a sold-out holiday, but it's the country shuts down for this Christian holiday.
Well, that would work if it was Christian, but it's not, right?
It is Christian. It's just they force everybody to participate in it. Even most of us atheists, we grew up participating in Christmas because we were Christians. That's why we still do it. It's too fundamentally ingrained in society at this point for us to escape it, even if we wanted to. Some atheists choose not to participate, sure, but the fact that we have Christmas in this country, it's a Christian holiday.
In this country, it is absolutely a secular holiday. And again, the way you can make that point is by examining Easter, right? Easter, which is retained for the most part, its religious nature, is not celebrated by everybody. Easter is typically, it's a one-day thing. Maybe it's a week.
Do we shut down for Easter? Does the country shut down for Easter?
No. No, my job wasn't even shut down for Easter.
Some people's jobs are, but most people get Easter off. I mean, come on, dude. Spring break is tied around Easter, right? Like, what? Come on, don't deny just the obvious, CJ.
It's not. Do you celebrate Easter?
Yeah, it's like a family tradition thing. I let my daughter go. Like me personally, I never understood the bunny and the egg thing, and I definitely don't go to church.
Right. So, I mean, I guess you do let your daughter, so it does impact your family a little bit. But the point being that it's not the same thing as Christmas, right? Easter is, for whatever reason, it's retained its religious nature. And
it's a national holiday for Christians. It's a national holiday, right?
I believe it is a state holiday. Yeah, it's a national holiday.
A national holiday. Just like Christmas is, you want to say it's secular, but it's literally Christmas, dude. Like, like that's a national. So you're complaining about Pride Month. If we were having the conversation, you'd probably complain about Black History Month as well, along these same contexts. But Christians literally already have it. This is the example of privilege.
They don't, though. December is not a Christian Pride Month. It's not a Christian persecution month, even though there are something like 575 million Christians being persecuted across the world today, right? And I'm not saying there should be a Christian Pride Month, by the way. My point is, if I came up to you and started shoving all of this Christian stuff down your throat all December, you'd have a problem with it. You would, because atheists did have a problem with it.
How is anybody shoving Pride Month down your throat? You either participate or you don't.
I mean, is that a joke? Like, there's constant people going after. There's cancelings if you don't give your ritual sacrifice to Pride Month, for crying out loud, right?
What?
Constant cancelings, constant going after people. All the world is participating in it and making you look like a bad guy if you don't, and going after you if you don't. I mean, like, that's like, it's
explain to me how this happens. Yeah, sure. Are there cancel people? Will people on Twitter talk shit to you if you say something bad about Pride? Yes. But like, this is it's Pride Month right now. I'm not going to go out into my community. I don't see people with pamphlets saying, be gay or go astray, or what you're saying just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. You can participate or you cannot participate. This is just a month to say, hey, we recognize you now. This is your month to take pride in yourself, and for us as a nation, for those that want to participate, to take pride in you too. And it doesn't have to just be about gay people. You know, a lot of atheists, we are associated with this because, you know, we lived in that closet too. We can empathize and we can relate, and this can be Pride Month for us as well. Like, you don't have to participate in it, CJ, you know, but if you talk shit about it on social media, what happens on social media? What you're mad about is more and more companies are accepting it. America is accepting it. More and more Americans are accepting it. That's your problem.
Well, that's one of the problems, but you also did point out the first problem, right? And you even acknowledged that it exists. People are literally it's literally like this new form of ritual sacrifice that we have in this world where it's like, everybody come across and hate this person for they have hated the almighty Pride Month. And it's ridiculous. It's completely absurd. You have, like, for just as a perfect example,
like,
right?
Does your side utilize the same tactics?
Some of them do, for sure. They went after, and I don't agree with them. A bunch of people went after Ben Shapiro for being Jewish. I thought that was disgusting. A bunch of people have gone after Russell Means because he was a libertarian. I thought that was disgusting. People go after Ron Paul for numerous reasons. I think that's disgusting. Right? I don't like.
I mean, your side's trying to cancel Liz Cheney just for speaking the truth about Trump. You know, I mean, so what you're talking about is just something ingrained in society. Isn't pushing anything down your throat. Like I said, you don't have to participate. You don't have to participate in Pride Month if you don't want to. But if you go around talking shit about gay people, talking shit about Pride Month, a lot of people's going to associate with you talking shit about gay people. Then they have every right to combat you. Especially, I mean, that's what social media is. You know, again, your issue is that more and more companies are accepting this, and this is becoming normal in society. And you don't want it to. You want to oppress them. You really like the oppression. You want to deny the oppression. You enjoy their oppression because you think it's evil.
Again, I've never at any point in time said that they should be oppressed. I think that's
do you think it's a sin?
Of course.
Do you think that God will send them to hell?
I think God will send any non-repentant sinner to hell.
Sure, but like, is being gay like a one-way trip to hell? Like, if you die gay, you're going to go to hell, right?
No.
Even if you're a Christian,
an unrepentant sinner, you're going to go to hell. People can.
So if you're a Christian but you're still gay, like say you do the anal last day of your life, right? But you're a Christian, does that person go to hell? What, did you freeze? I'm like, I thought I got him, but I think he froze. So we'll allow him to come back, or I mean, we'll allow him. Like, this is my channel. I'm used to being on my channel. I'm sure he'll come back, or the stream will end. Can you guys still hear me? Are we still live? You guys can still hear me, so I'll just talk. So, you know, this morning I was looking into. Hopefully he'll come back. Hopefully you guys will stay on. You know, this morning. This is so weird. This morning I was looking into the gay epidemic, or the AIDS epidemic in the 80s and 90s, and how for a long time it was considered gay cancer, and gay people, they made it like a pre-existing condition, so you couldn't get coverage for AIDS. And it wasn't until science came out that showed that AIDS can be transmitted to heterosexual people that they actually made legislation in this country that allowed for people with AIDS to get health coverage. You know, if that's not oppression, I don't know what the hell is. Hopefully, yeah, it looks like the synagogue's internet failed. I'm not going to stay on his channel and make it the Rage Show. So we'll give him time to come back. If not, then I'll just leave and the stream will be ended, y'all. But I do want to give him a chance. Maybe he can fix it. It is his channel. And we've had some contentious moments. That whole damn trying to take it away from what we're talking about really just makes me cray-cray. That's probably him right there. Let's see what he's saying. No. I want to give him a couple minutes. If not, I'm not going to take up his time. I figured I don't think he can end it since I'm in here. So I'm not going to sit here and make it the Raging Atheist channel for too long. I will take this time to go through more of my list. Just to go back to the first part of this conversation. Where was I at? We'll start here. Gary Matson and Winfield Mauder, a gay couple, were murdered on July 1st, 1999 by white supremacist brothers Matthew and Tyler Williams in Redding, California. Tyler Williams was sentenced for firebombing synagogues and an abortion clinic. U.S. Army PFC Barry Winchell was murdered on July 6, 1999 in Fort Campbell, Kentucky by fellow soldier Calvin Glover. And CJ, if you're not going to be able to come back and you're actually able to listen to this on your phone or something, just like message me. I'm going to give it a few minutes and then I'm just going to leave and we'll end the stream. Matthew Shepard died in 1998. This is probably this is what really influenced me. A gay student was fatally attacked in Laramie, Wyoming on October 7th, 1998. Shepard was tortured, beaten, and severely tied to a fence and abandoned. He was found 18 hours after the attack and succumbed to his injuries less than a week later on October 12th. His attackers, Russell Arthur Henderson and Aaron James McKinney, are both serving 2 consecutive sentences. All right, you're back. All right, I talked. Let's see if this...
Yeah, sorry about that. My Wi-Fi will occasionally decide that it wants to not work. But only temporarily. Those who are fans of my show understand it does happen basically every episode, actually. But your fans probably wouldn't, so I apologize to them.
Well, I mean, it does happen to me. Here recently, in this area, we've been having issues with our power grid or something because power's gone out like 5 times in the last month and a half.
No kidding.
I'm like, I know I paid the power bill. What's going on?
So now just to clarify, because I don't know if you made your full point, the question you had asked me was, do I believe that if somebody is an active homosexual on the day they die, they will go to hell? Is that accurate?
Yeah, if they're a Christian, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of churches, if you're a homosexual, then they'll make you abstain. Like they'll let you in, but you just can't be active, right? A lot of Christian churches now are definitely letting active gay people in. Some, not a lot, but some, and that's definitely a thing that you see Christians reacting to. But yes, like on the day that they died, if they are active, they're a Christian, do they go to hell? If that's the only bad thing that they've done, like they would make it into hell otherwise, right? Or they'd make it into heaven otherwise. But this one act.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question, actually, because it's a question. If I'm being honest, unfortunately, it's a question you'll get different answers from different Christians from.
I agree with that.
My answer is it very much depends on the individual and only God knows. And I'll give a perfect example of someone who I believe was a saved person, despite the fact that their last day on earth doesn't seem to demonstrate that, and that's the rapper DMX. His last day on earth was he died of a heroin overdose. And some would say that heroin, taking drugs, things of that nature, that's something that Christians do not do. I, being a big fan of DMX and being somebody who was familiar with his life story, I don't believe that. I think he was a genuine Christian who had a very genuine struggle with a very difficult beast. And I think that even though that
very
did
homophobic dude, he was a very homophobic dude as well.
I mean, I'm sure he was. He had a lot of that stuff in his raps for sure. Talking about well, there's no need to go on. I'm sure DMX fans already have the lyrics in their heads.
I used to like DMX. I went back and listened to him not too long ago before he died, and I'm like, whoa, wait. But when I liked DMX back in the day, I was probably still a homophobe.
Well, my only point in even bringing him up is just to say that if one were to take a somewhat legalistic view, one would say, well, he died of a heroin overdose. Of course he wasn't saved. The thing that killed him is something that's non-Christian. I don't believe that. I think that people sometimes have really difficult struggles that is very hard to get over, and I am willing to give them sympathy for that because I think that God gives me sympathy and grace for that. Yeah, so to apply that to the homosexual, say that somebody is genuinely converted, but they have a struggle with this, and it just so happens that on a day where they had a particularly bad struggle with it, they also get hit by a car or something like that.
Well, I'm not even talking like that. Like, no, they're an active homosexual. Like every day they got a relationship, they got a partner, a husband, even. They're Christian. You know, they never stop being. You know, they never practice abstinence, never stop being themselves. But they're a Christian, and there are plenty of Christians like that out there.
Yeah, in fact, the YouTuber Shane Dawson is famously a Christian like that. And I would
and again, I don't like doesn't there is specific reference for you to believe that your God would send this person to hell and not a drug addict. You know, like I'm sure that they had drug addiction back then, but they probably didn't associate it in the same way that we do or look at it in the same way, call it the same things. But I don't really think you can. I mean, I think that it's rather progressive of you to say that DMX would go to heaven despite his drug abuse. But I don't think you can equate the two. Again, we have direct Bible passages about homosexuality, not about smoking the crack pipe.
Well, that's fair. Actually, that's 100% fair. But we do also have, and I'll give you a better example actually, because that is a fair point. We also do have explicit biblical passages talking about not mocking or blaspheming the Lord, right? Now, one of the thieves on the cross who was on either side of Jesus, if you recall the story, one of them does end up actually going to heaven, right? Jesus says, on this day you will be with me in paradise, as they're both about to die. Well, previously, that same person, while on that cross, was mocking and belittling Jesus and indeed blaspheming, right? So even though on the self same day he had committed one of the more egregious sins according to the Bible, he still ended up being saved. Now, do I know anything about that? No, God knows only, which is why I tried to take the position that I want to lean on the side of caution. However, I think that's a good example of you do have people. I mean, people are fickle. We do fickle things. You know what I mean? And that doesn't mean that there's gray areas in morality, but it does mean that humans are quite gray. Now, to expand to the more Milo Yiannopoulos, Shane Dawson, those kinds, right, who are actively involved in the lifestyle and also professing some level of faith. I would have to tell them biblically, respectfully, I think that you have some level of flaw in your ideology and your belief system. I would encourage you greatly to look over it, because I don't know for a fact that your faith is not genuine. I would never claim such a thing, but it's difficult for me to, as an outsider, see that your faith is genuine, right? And so, to get to the specific question, right, you die that specific day. As an outsider, it's very difficult for me to say that that person, yes, would be saved. And it's very easy for me to say that that person, no, would not be saved. I personally will not make that distinction because I think that belongs solely to God. However, that's the flaw. Am I making sense there?
Sure. I mean, yeah, I'm not going to press you too hard on it because I think that you'll catch a lot of shit from Christians for what you just said. No, I applaud it. Like, but so my point in asking those questions is to try to get you to see, like, because you was trying to put, like, I'm not consistent in my stance on marriage. But the point of fact is that we have this institution in America called marriage that comes with a lot of benefits, right? And certain people could have those benefits. This one group was saying, "Hey, look at me. We want these benefits as well," and they had to fight for them, and that was recent. And the only people really trying to hold that back in the country are the religious people using their conservative political party to do so. That's like the whole point that I'm trying to get to you, is that when you have a two-party system and one of those parties in this country is actively trying to hold a certain specific demographic of people down, that by definition is opposition or oppression, right? Like the Republican Party, especially in red states, are making it very hard for gay people to be gay people or to have the same kind of benefits and services that everybody else has. I used marriage as an example, but you can also use transition surgeries, trying to make it to where trans people can't be trans. You can take it to right now. There's not a single legal law on the book that protects trans people from being discriminated in this country. Not a single one. No laws protecting this demographic of people. Now, I know you would like to equate that to those other demographics, but we're talking about LGBTQ plus peoples here. A specific demographic.
Well, I would separate those two issues, the transgender issue and the homosexual issue, only because there is a lot of other questions that go into the trans issue that don't necessarily apply to the homosexual issue. So I would just kind of leave that there for a moment. And then again, I would say as far as the, I mean, I think it's just a matter of, how do I say this in a way that I think is most effective? So, yeah, Black History Month, right? Black History Month is for a very specific reason. That reason being that there is a long history of brutal oppression of Black people in this country, and even before this country existed on this continent, right? Going all the way back to, I don't know if Christopher Columbus himself had African slaves, but at least going back to the 1600s. So therefore, we decide that we're going to have a era of time to celebrate this particular moment, right? And what are the different things that we say are serious oppression in this example? They're systematic rape, systematic kidnapping, sending people off into mass enslavement, beatings and tortures, and so on and so forth, right?
I think that's definitely a form of oppression, but like the most extreme form. Like when you're talking about oppression, again, you're simply talking about prolonged, cruel, or unjust treatment of a certain demographic. That's all you're talking about. Oppression has many faces, many flavors, just like genocide does. I mean, genocide can look very different in very different times. I made a statement on Facebook this morning. I believe the early policies towards AIDS in our country could be considered an American genocide of LGBTQ plus peoples in this country. I was going to get into the nuance of that with you, but I would just strongly urge you, because this was well before your time. This was when I was a child in the 80s growing up. But there was a time in this country where we literally did not allow gay people health treatment when they had AIDS because they were gay. And then as soon as we found the science for it, as soon as we got the science that heterosexuals contracted too, then you started to see laws come along. You started to see health insurance companies have to give benefits to people. There was a pandemic. There has been systematic oppression of gay people in this country for as long as this country has existed, because this country, I'm going to say a controversial thing to the atheist side, was started by a bunch of fucking Christians. So, you want to call it secularism, but this country has always placed its emphasis on Christianity. And this, in my opinion, was a Christian country till very recently. And it's very recently that secularism has started to take over. But we're still fighting against the people that want that old theocracy back, that want that old privilege back. And we're simply stating, no, you don't get that privilege simply for being a Christian. That we're trying to strive to the ideals of America to finally get there. And that's what this conversation is about, especially when it comes to marriage. But systematic oppression of gay people really is undeniable. Like, there's so many different aspects to it. There's the violence. There's the legal issues. There's lack of health insurance. There's lack of legitimacy. I see people in the chat saying, well, marriage has benefits because of children. It's not just children. It's not just children. It's next of kin benefits. There's so many different aspects to it that the benefits that come along with marriage. There's a lot of baggage that comes along with marriage. That's one of the reasons I don't like marriage, and I've never participated. I don't want half my shit to get taken away. Yeah,
and so there is a lot, of course, to be said there. Not that that's a problem. I go on big rants, so I'm trying not to stop you when you go on them either. You know what I mean? Because I'm way more long-winded than any of my guests I've ever had. So
I do talk fast.
So, however, though, I think
I'm going to be listening. I'm going to turn off my camera. If I smoke in this room, I have to be at the window and blowing it like right out. I'm in my nephew's bedroom, so I'll still be able to hear you.
Let's see. There you go. Got my train of thought back. So a couple things. The first thing I would want to say is I think that the big point that I make with the Black History Month one, right? Not even so much is the fact that Black History Month exists per se, right? As much as it is like what are we actually looking at when we see those kinds of oppressions? They're brutal things, right? And whether or not anybody I know Jill's in the chat. I think Jill's very much opposed to Black History Month. Whether or not you agree or disagree with the month itself, we all acknowledge why it exists, which is a vicious history, right? I personally, I don't think that we should turn Columbus Day into Indigenous Peoples Day, because that seems a little contradictory to me, but perhaps like Tecumseh's birthday or something like that would be a good one.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to like worship anything Columbus.
Yeah, I agree with that. I find Columbus to be abhorrent personally, but not that that's the topic, right?
Yeah.
But the point is, we would all acknowledge, whether you agree or not, we would all acknowledge, right, why that would be something that would be established, right? And frankly, I mean, even if there was like a gay pride day on, I think June 26th is when the Supreme Court decision was made. Like, it's not like I'm actually like opposed to people having their holidays, right? That's perfectly fine. But like, it's such an over exaggeration to me. You get this entire month because you weren't able to marry, and because sometime in the 80s, a couple of instances, and it is important to point out, it was a couple of instances, right? I mean, there is a lot of violence against a lot of groups in this country. I'm sure you would not say that Christians are oppressed in this country. I wouldn't either, by the way. However, 20.1% of all hate crimes are religiously based, and they're typically on either anti-Catholic, anti-Protestant, or anti-Jewish lines. They're very rarely on anti-Muslim or other groups, even though that is a small minority that does happen. And yet we wouldn't claim that these groups are oppressed in this country, right? But you compare that to gender identity, it's like 2.7%. I think sexual orientation is like 15%, which, to be fair, is much higher than 2.7, and indeed is the problem. But we still wouldn't say that.
Well, and real quick though, like, that's an important point that you made though, because that is a high number, and you're admitting it's a high number, and it's especially a high number considering per capita the percentage of people that we're talking about. When we talk about LGBTQ plus peoples, we're talking about a staunch minority in this country, are we not?
Yeah, I think it's like 3%, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think it's around 3% of the population.
Yeah, for sure. So, and that I would acknowledge that for sure. That is certainly a disproportional thing. And again, I would even fully grant that. I do think though that there's still an important point to be made, right? We're still saying that like so many of these other groups are not oppressed, even though they have much higher numbers of attacks against them. And in some of those instances, Jews are also a very small minority, right? I think they're also roughly about 1% of the country, maybe 1.5% of the country. It's not much, right?
I would agree that Christians are not persecuted in this country. I would agree that in some places they are. But I would say, like, you know, if Christians in this country weren't allowed to marry like everybody else could, right? If Christians weren't allowed to get health benefits like everybody else could, if Christians weren't allowed to be Christians, like if you had this atheist American society now to where the social pressures on you, if you were to come out as of Christian, would include possible violence or possible death, then I would say yes, you are being oppressed. Now, you know, I totally agree. Oppression can be brutal, and most often in the instances that we know of oppression are. You're exactly right about that. But again, oppression doesn't have to be brutal. It can be subtle. And I would maintain that until recently, it was a somewhat brutal oppression of gay people in this country. You could say it's a few instances, but no, it's not a few instances. Again, we're talking about a very minute portion of the country that is hated by a vast majority of the country. And you can't, well, hated by a vast, no. Where a good almost half of the country literally thinks it's a sin just to be who they are. I'll put it that way.
Well, and I do think there are certainly some people who will abuse that terminology. Not atheists, by the way. It is Christians who I'm talking about. You know, like, and I freely acknowledge and even fight against the Steven Andersons and Patrick Doyles and other NIFB.
And I do appreciate that about you. I really do. Because I've called for that, and that's one thing I like about you, CJ.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that also. And again, I understand that's like, I mean, just as one example that I think is popular, we all know about it. Steven Anderson's whole, the the good thing is there's 50 less pedophiles in the world speech. I mean, that was disgusting, right? Absolutely abhorrent. I personally would say, though, that not only do I think the majority of Christians are not in that camp, I don't think you can get that from a consistent interpretation of the Bible. Whether you look at things like the Pericope Adulterae or Paul calling the law a taskmaster, meaning that it's not something that is necessarily meant to be a eternal truth, but something that's meant to lead you to your greater understanding of human sin and forgiveness and things of that nature. I mean, just think of Matthew 5, right? The Sermon on the Mount. Jesus says to look upon another woman with lust is adultery, which carries a death penalty. To be angry at your brother with unjust cause is murder, which is a death penalty. And to violate any point of the law is to violate all of it, which of course would be something like 34 death penalties. The point being that Jesus amplifies it to such a point that if we actually took it literally, we would have to execute every single human being on the planet, which is what he's actually trying to point out. And this is the whole basis for Christian forgiveness, grace, and things of that nature. And I would point out, too, it was understood this way for quite a long time, even in this country. Very many of the original fundamentalists, people like Billy Graham, Billy Sunday, Oral Roberts, William Branham, William Jennings Bryan, so on and so forth, were very opposed to the ideas of theocracy and theonomy, and actually having state-mandated Mosaic law, because we've always understood as fundamentalists that the most fundamental thing in our ethic is grace. Now, that doesn't mean that there hasn't been extremists, and especially, I think, most especially, I should say, in the Deep South, there has been extreme Christian hatred towards a lot of groups, and really just extreme sectarian hatred in general in the Deep South that goes back, almost 300 years at this point. But in the majority of the country, I don't think that was the case. And even amongst a lot of fundamentalists, let's remember, I don't remember the exact name of it, but the Baptist coalition that fought for civil rights, made up almost entirely of black ministers. Martin Luther King started it, right? It was made up of Baptist ministers. That's like one of the most conservative groups that you can actually have, right? The point being that these intensely conservative people have very often had an understanding that, no, we don't want to use sin as an excuse to hate people or to kill people, even though that group has always existed.
All right, so my counter to that would be, and I don't think that America's ever truly been a theocracy. That's not my statement by saying that this is a Christian country, but we've definitely had pockets of that. The Salem witch trials would be a legitimate example of that. But my response would be, until recently in this country, very recently, now not in your lifetime, but I definitely think within my lifetime, I don't have the exact dating on it, but it used to be common practice in this country that this country saw homosexuality as a mental illness, and we would throw homosexual peoples into insane asylums and use electroshock therapy and all of this crap to try to rid them of their quote-unquote insanity, until, in very recent times, the science came back. It's not a mental illness, and we had to stop that practice. But still, as recent as I believe it was 2008, 2012 time period when Mike Pence was the governor of Indiana, he was literally trying to reinstate electroshock therapy for homosexual peoples in his state.
Well, that is actually, that's not
beliefs.
That's not actually accurate, though. What Mike Pence did support conversion therapy, but it is important to note that conversion therapy is not electroshock therapy, even though electroshock therapy was used.
Electroshock therapy.
Sometimes. It's important. That's why it's important to make a distinction, because
do you think Mike Pence would have outlawed, would have not included the electroshock therapy part?
Absolutely. Let me explain why. So at the time that electroshock therapy was used, first off, it was used on numerous groups of people. It wasn't just homosexuals. It was used on schizophrenics. It was used on nymphomaniacs. It was used on people who were bipolar, right? It was a very common thing to use for a whole bunch of different believed and also legitimate psychological disorders. And it wasn't the only thing used. People frequently used lobotomies back then. People used experimental drugs that were, in fact, it was such a terrible time in psychology that it's actually the basis for an entire subgenre of horror movies, right?
Oh
Um,
yeah, totally.
the point being that there does have to be a separation from conversion therapy itself, which is simply the idea that somebody could go to therapy and potentially be converted away from homosexuality, and the practices that were admittedly associated with it for sure, but were associated with everything else back then too, right? So as medical technology progressed, specifically in the psychological field, we started turning away from all of those things, not just the electroshock, but like I said, also things like lobotomies and so on and so forth. Modern day conversion therapy is very much just counseling, and it's also counseling that almost always has to be done willingly. Um, for example, in the state of California, they recently wanted to outlaw it. One of the biggest arguments against it was if a Christian homosexual who is an adult decides to go seek counseling on their own accord, they have every right to do that. And in fact, even very many LGBT activists were arguing some of the same stuff. I don't know if it ended up passing or not. But the argument there was very clear, right? Because conversion therapy is not what it once was. I will totally acknowledge that it certainly was a terrible thing at one point in time. But that was because I think all of the medical technology we used at that time and medical practices we used at that time were just abhorrent. As we progressed, people have had much different ways of looking into it. And frankly, some people say conversion therapy works. I know people, and of course, you've probably even seen people who claim to be former homosexuals. Now, did they go through the electroshock and all that? Of course not, right? Because that doesn't. But they say that they were in some way, whether they say it was praying the gay away or whether they say it was because of some sort of counseling or whether they say it was because, whatever it happens to be, they at least claim it works. I don't know what exactly you do with that information, just simply because it does seem to me like that's a big point, right? But nonetheless, I think it is important to note Mike Pence was never interested in torturing homosexuals or anything like that. That is a point of rhetoric people used that is based in a conflation, perhaps an honest one. I'm not saying people are necessarily being dishonest, but a conflation of old practices with modern practices.
Well, sure, but I mean, still the point stands. In this country, for the longest time, we were throwing gay people in insane asylums. People are still trying to make that case to this very present day. I'm trying to debunk this notion that you have that everything is peachy now and these people aren't being oppressed now. Not your grandpa's lifetime, not your dad's lifetime, my lifetime, because I'm probably about as old as your dad. But that this oppression is still happening now, and we're still fighting for it, and we're still fighting for it against your side of the fence here.
Certainly, some of them, like I said, I freely acknowledge that. I do think that there is, a lot of, like I said, even, not only nuance, but also just misconceptions in a lot of that, right? I do think, and again, I will look into the National Prayer Breakfast whole thing with Uganda, because if they did actually support that, I'll just say publicly here, I thoroughly oppose that. Theocracy is evil. And I mean that genuinely. Theocracy is evil every single time without exception, unless you have the actual God himself at the head. And obviously everybody would know if he was. But nonetheless, for the most part, what you see is people who they have disagreement with it, even if it's as far as saying that they shouldn't have marriage rights. It's still not something where they're wanting to, for the most part, again, freely acknowledging that straight pride parades and stuff like that exist. For the most part, it's not people who are wanting to execute homosexuals, imprison homosexuals, take away any of their human rights, like medical practices and stuff like that. Those are a limited group. In fact, they're so limited that you can almost pinpoint the exact groups that make them up, right? Like NIFB, some of the extreme Muslim sects. I'm sure that some of the Haredi Jewish people are probably in that position because theocracy is kind of a inherent part of Haredi Judaism. But of course, they're actually only applying that to Israel, so that might not even apply to America. The point being that, for the most part, people who are opposing homosexuality, even going as far as a legal opposition to homosexuality, are still not wanting to throw people in insane asylums, to torture people, to execute people, to imprison people, anything along those lines.
Well, and real quick, I caught most of what you said. I'm not trying to bypass any things that you said, but Jill did kind of pop out at me, and he's like, "Have Rage cite his sources about this science that came back." So I just want to hook Jill up. Hooker E 1957. This is the particular research that I just referenced. The adjustment of male overt homosexual Journal of Projective Techniques 2118 through 31, and that would be your very first, as I just cited. And there has been many since. Jill, get in the real world. Jill said I wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, and I guess I've kind of looking every now and then to the live chat. By the way, if anybody's in the live chat and has not been acknowledged, which is pretty much every single one of you, I apologize for that. I haven't been paying too much attention to it. Just looked through a little bit, though. See KCA, Eyeball, Pigs Can Fly, Jen with one N, Nicholas, Jamie Russell, Jill, Eyes to See. A lot of you guys here, actually. Shalom to all of you. Thank you for being here. Sorry, I didn't mean to click on that. But that was the one that he just had up there. Anyways. Wow, actually, it's about 20 people watching at the moment. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, we've been going for a couple hours. It's surprising because we're not budging. Like, I think I've given fairly, at least enough for you to at least consider maybe, not brutal oppression. We'll take that apart. My personal belief has been a brutal oppression of gay people, but you have to admit, CJ, that there's been some oppression of gay people in this country, and even till up to this day, like, yes, they have a lot more freedom, they have a lot more equality, but it's still something that we're fighting for. We have to fight against Christian theists at this moment, but this is something that's ingrained in the society, and it's going to take more than the last 10 years to get that out of our society. Just like it's taken quite a long time to get that. I know you don't believe in systematic racism, but it's taken a long. We still deal with the race issue, at least after all of this time.
Quick note. I just want to point out that's not exactly true. I just don't believe in systematic racism as it pertains to African Americans. I do believe there's.
Well, and that's what I would be referring to.
Well, I just wanted to point that out because I do strongly believe in systematic racism. I just think it's applied to another group of people, and we could probably get on that. But
yeah, that would be a totally different conversation. Yeah. I know. It did get heated at a moment, but I don't think any of us really tossed words of animosity at each other. I'm truly here just trying to understand how you could have this perspective. My thing would be, in my opinion, and I don't know you well, but this is just something that you've grown up to, and you don't want to admit oppression. Because you fundamentally think that homosexuality is wrong, and that correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe if you commit this act, then you somehow deserve to be lesser than. Definitely in the eyes of God, but I know you've been arguing, and you've surprised me with some of your arguments. I'm not gonna lie, some of them have been decent, but I still can't quite understand, and I'm gonna chalk it up pretty much to your age. You weren't here at the brunt of its worst. You didn't see it. You didn't feel it. You didn't walk around and hear how people talked about gay people. Everybody, it was just an accepted thing in society. You have primarily grown up in a different America than has ever really existed before, and you're growing up in an America where all of these cultures are now clashing, and all of these questions are finally being asked and answered. So I can somewhat understand it, but I would hope that you would at least consider the proposition that maybe some form of oppression has happened here, and maybe from there we could go. But I don't know. What do you think? Like, are you willing to concede any oppression at all towards these people?
Well, I would absolutely concede that some oppression has happened, of course, and in fact, I would even say that even before this, there is, because I obviously understand the what would you call that? Malpractice, really. I mean, it's hard to call it malpractice because nobody knew any different, but the medical community did absolutely butcher all people in their fields, and that's doubly worse if you don't actually have something that can be classified on the DSM as a mental illness, right? So it's I freely acknowledge that there's a double whammy there that is, in the direction of oppression. I'm familiar with some of the cases of brutal murders The Harvey Milk one is one that I'm familiar with. The 73 one I wasn't too familiar with, but I'm quite familiar with the Stonewall riots. And a couple
we
others.
didn't even get there. I did want to talk a little bit about the Stonewall riots, but I think it was all a part of that initial point, the violence and stuff.
Right. But what I would say is, acknowledging those things, I would also want to ask for my opposition, which of course is represented by you at this point, to also have it.
I'm listening. My daughter's knocking. I meant to turn that up. I'm listening, but continue.
Yeah, for sure. To acknowledge that most people who are actively against the LGBT group, like Michael Brown, like myself, like numerous other Christians, it's not a hatred thing. It's not an oppression thing. That's the first thing I would want people to acknowledge, right? It's simply it's the same thing you're doing. You disagree with me being a Christian. That's fine, right? That doesn't mean you want me to be necessarily deconverted per se, or that you necessarily want me to be punished, or that you necessarily want me to, right? It simply means that you have a disagreement and you're active about it.
I disagree with Christianity. I don't disagree with you being a Christian. I understand why you're a Christian. You were born in America. You were born to Christian parents. That's why you're a Christian. I think, honestly, CJ, if you were born in Saudi Arabia, you'd be a Muslim. That's my position. That's a very common position that atheists take.
Well, and that's fair. And the other, but it does, I think, sort of help make the point, though, right? Where it's like, this isn't like a example of people wanting to hate people. It's an example of things that we genuinely believe X, Y, and Z are not a good thing, just as you genuinely would believe X, Y, and Z are not a good thing. And so you want to convince people to go against it. The second thing that I would want acknowledged is just simply this, that we have, I'll acknowledge that it's happened, but we have totally overblown the homosexual persecution thing to the point of where we equate it almost on the same level as groups that have been horribly persecuted, not only in this country, but across the world. Jewish people, Christian people, Black people, Native American people, Chinese people, right? I mean, things that are almost like they're hard to even fathom, you know what I mean? What these groups had to go through. And while we can certainly acknowledge that things have happened in the past, I think that equation to me it's arrogant and it's self-righteous, if I'm being honest, because I don't think any of those groups are necessarily demanding the same equality per se, as far as in their, like, not equality in their personhood, but equality in their, like, what would you call that? There's a term for it the comedians use, but basically, this is how bad my life was, and it's equal to how bad your life was. You know what I mean? That whole thing. There's a term, but I can't think of it at the moment. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I get you. And I would disagree. I would think that you're confusing oppression with brutality. And I would argue till I'm blue in the face that there has been brutality against gay people. I think that there's I consider a teenage child afraid to talk to their parents about what they're going through and who they are and what they're feeling about themselves, and I would consider that brutality against that child. Anytime somebody, some things we just don't deem acceptable in society. And I understand, Christian society doesn't want to deem homosexual activities as acceptable. But unfortunately, society has changed, and we are changing. And to look back at our past, if we don't recognize the things that we've done wrong, we'll never be able to correct those things. We'll just continue to make those same mistakes moving forward. And those same mistakes could be applied to you the next time. It could be the nuns rise and gain control, and it's you being oppressed in the same manner. And I can almost guarantee if you were being suppressed and if you weren't allowed to just be a Christian and be open about that, you kind of see that, in people's reaction to cancel culture, right? Like, people are telling you can't be this way, you can't be this way. And there's a reaction to that you would literally feel like you were being oppressed in the same conditions that these gay people have lived their lives up until right now, this very moment. It's happening right now. Some people don't feel safe enough to be themselves and come out. We deem some things as unacceptable. I don't think a pedophile should feel safe and be able to come out, but we as a society, not me as an individual, decide those things. And that's where the fight is with homosexuality right now. It's always been the Christians deciding that was something to be pushed to the shadows, right? Well, now society's saying differently, and that's the fight we're having, right? And people are getting more and more equality, more and more freedom, but it's still a fight. We're still fighting it in the Supreme Court. You know that, so the point of me coming here was to try to show you, just the oppression. And it's hard to see when we're living in our own shoes. Empathy is supposed to be what makes human beings exceptional, but empathy is a truly hard thing to really do. It's really, really hard to come out of your position. I am the raging atheist. I promote what I promote. But again, I would never wish that upon a Christian, that same type of treatment or oppression that from what I see, LGBTQ plus peoples are getting still to this very day.
Well, and so there's I think a couple things I would want to question, just simply because it's a good thing to get to at this point. So there's a famous incident that everybody on the live chat, I'm sure, is aware of a baker in Colorado who decided that he did not want to not serve a gay couple, but specifically service a gay wedding, meaning do all the catering, make a specific cake, all that sort of stuff, right? Now, it has been the argument of many, myself included, that you have every right as a business owner to make that kind of a distinction if you wish. And in fact, people make that kind of distinction all the time in either direction, just for whatever reason this particular case got really popular, right?
Well, like we decided that though, right? Like back when we ended Jim Crow, you don't have the right to tell a black person they can't come into your restaurant. You don't have the right to tell a black person they have to drink from this water fountain or sit on this in this area of the bus. I don't think people cite their religion as their cause to commit bigotries. Like if I'm a manager in a restaurant, if I decided I'm not going to let Trumpers into my restaurant, there's an issue there, right? Like there's a definite issue there that wouldn't fly, and we've seen examples of that, and it hasn't flown. Like these places get sued, they get taken to court, right?
Well, so I think there's a couple important things to point out there, though, right? So first off, I think race and sexual orientation are definitely incredibly different. There is no evidence at all that people are actually born homosexual. In fact, I would argue, and I have for quite some time, that homosexuality is an inherent trait of all human beings, and it develops like every preference does by virtue of usually subliminal and subconscious association.
Yeah, I don't know all the science behind it. I'm not going to pretend to. Is there any evidence that you aren't born gay?
Yes, namely the fact that there seems to be no genetic
gene.
difference.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
And there is a second point too, which is that there's also like for example, people have linked certain things.
So is there a straight gene, CJ? I have to ask this every time somebody brings up the gene. Is there a straight gene?
Well, hey, so that's a funny thing to say, because number one, we didn't bring up the genetic argument.
And we're not, but like you just kind of mentioned it, and I was like, that's the first one I have to say when people mention the genetics is there a straight gene?
and that's fine, and I'll actually answer the question more directly, but I do want to point out that it was the LGBT movement that was saying it was a genetic thing, and then we proved that it wasn't. It wasn't us saying that it was a genetic thing, and then you know what I mean. So that is an important thing to point out. But the second thing that's also important to point out is there doesn't have to be a genetic difference for heterosexuality, because heterosexuality is the default.
Yeah, and I really don't care if people are born gay or not. What I care about is protecting people that should be protected. That's what I care about. Pedophiles, I personally don't think that they should be protected. Society agrees with me. I'm on the side, polygamy, I consider that different than polyamorous. I might get in trouble for that. I don't know. Maybe it's the same thing. Maybe it's not. But I think that there's definitely two power dynamics there. I'm definitely against the power dynamics involved with polygamy. Usually it's like I said, a male patriarchy dynamic that I don't agree with. But again, it would take society to state that, and that's where we're at in this point of our existence, is that we're in societies that are coming to terms with these things. Right. So that's why we're even having this conversation right now, is because we're trying to come to terms, and we're trying to say, people have rights, and it's not just always that traditional, white male Christian landowner that's got all the rights here. We've had to fight for it in civil rights. We've had to fight for it with the women's rights movement, and now we're fighting for it with gay rights, normalizing atheism, indigenous people's rights. Like the fight goes on and on and on. I'll never fight for equality for pedophiles. Like, I don't think that they should be free in society, able to just do that. But again, that's a nuanced conversation in itself, because I think how we treat pedophiles could be a bit differently. We could do it a bit differently. But I would never advocate that, a pedophile should be able to get married to a child, for instance, right? We're talking about grown adults making consenting decisions. I know that's kind of why you kept to the polygamy and the incest, and I do see where they equate, and they're good arguments. I'm not going to deny that, but at the same time, it's the standards that we're trying to create as a society. I personally am opposed to both of those things. I'm not opposed to homosexuality. Used to be, but I'm not anymore, and it's because I know these people. They're good people. They can be shitty people too. Not all gay people are great people. Some of them are fucking assholes. But some of, cis people are assholes. Like the problem, the thing is that human beings are human beings, and we should judge people based on their actions. I should be based on some of my antics here on YouTube, and I never really get angry when people judge me based upon that. That's what I get for doing that shit, right? But what we should base it on that, and not on, who they're sleeping with, who they love, unless it's something that society has just deemed not worthy. Now, I understand the Christian position is they think society should deem this not as something that we are accepting. And we're fighting for that it should be. And that's where the clash is, and that's why we're still having these discussions. In my opinion, if gay people were not oppressed in this country, we probably wouldn't have this conversation at all.
Well, and so there's a lot of things there. I do want to...
Yeah, I just spotted out, and we can't go forever. I do got to eventually get off here and go make sure my daughter's all good and stuff. I said I got as long as you got, but we could talk about this all day, and it'd be like 8 o'clock. Holy shit, I got another stream starting right now.
Right. I think that there's a couple things, though. The first, just because I don't want to leave it hanging, I do just want to point out the reason I bring up the born gay thing, which, by the way, again, I take what I think would be a controversial position on this, which is that I think every individual human being is born with a homosexual propensity, because I think every single human being is born with a propensity to any preference. You're not born liking chocolate, for example, but you, over time, because of things both conscious and subconscious, develop.
My experience, though, is different than that. Like, I'm a cis dude. I've never been attracted to a man, right? Like, I always thought, and probably, carried over from my homophobic days, that I wasn't attracted to trans women. Last couple of years, there's been quite a few trans women that, it does it for me. I'm not going to lie. But I've never been attracted to a man. And just like I know several gay men that will tell me straight up they've never been attracted to a woman ever in their life. I had a cousin. I have 2 or 3 cousins right now. They're lesbians. They'll straight up tell you, I've never been attracted to a man. Now, they slept with men. That was the social norms back then. You had to hide yourself, but they were never attracted to them.
Well, and my model would actually, or theory, I guess I should say, it's not a model. I'm not a scientist. Really, it's hypothesis, but anyways, would actually account for that, because, so for example, I often use the example of coffee, because coffee is one of those quote unquote acquired tastes, right? Most people, the very first time that they drink coffee, probably did not actually like it, right? It's something but that over time they develop. That's why they call it an acquired taste, right? is because it's one of those things that over time you acquire. Same thing with cigarettes. Most people who smoke cigarettes for the first time, they're not like, oh man, that was the greatest experience of my life.
Are you kidding? Like cigarettes, the first couple times you smoke cigarettes, you get one of the best highs you're ever going to get.
You also vomit everywhere though. And
that's if you smoke a lot. Like I never vomited from smoking one cigarette, but like I did get higher than hell. And that happened. That stopped quite soon into it though. You get over that.
I'll tell you just from, I guess I can only speak from my experience, right? But me and all of my friends in high school were all cigarette smokers. And not a single one of us enjoyed it at the beginning. And my mom always said the same thing, and she's still a cigarette smoker, actually.
I mean, it's nasty. Sure, it tastes nasty. You actually taste it and you smell it at first, and it's not pleasant. I mean, man, it was such a long time ago for me. It's hard for me to really remember, but yeah, I mean, I can grant that, but I mean, it's not like that. You're so.
Well, let me kind of.
I mean, I think the point here is like don't knock it till you try it. You don't know if you're gay until
It's one of those things where it's like the way that you develop these preferences for quote unquote acquired tastes is whether consciously or subconsciously. Over time, you start to associate positive feelings with the thing you have a preference for. Sometimes it is completely subconscious. Sometimes people actually, and coffee is actually a funny example, because coffee is one where people will associate so many different qualities with it before they actually taste it, right? I can say for me personally as a kid, it was like, that's the adult drink. It gives you all the energy and you get to put creamers in it and all that other kind of cool stuff. You know what I mean? It comes with whipped cream when you go to Starbucks, and like there's all these great associations with it before I've ever actually even tasted the drink. In other words, I've been associating positive feelings with this thing that now I have a very strong preference for. I think that's the same way that a lot of sexual practices probably work, is whether consciously or unconsciously, you start to associate your positive feelings with certain things. And the farther you go down that line, the more strongly you develop those positive feelings.
I will agree to a point. As you progress and you're more sexually active, you're going to find more and more things that you like. But when it comes to like attraction, that's different than that, right? Like, what you're attracted to, like you don't really, there's no thought process behind it. Your body's just attracted to this. And that's quite different than building a preference over, say, a given amount of time. Not to say that plenty, people get experimental, they want to know, but like generally your body tells you what you're attracted to. Like the people know what they're attracted to. You know that you're attracted to what you're attracted to, right? Because your body tells you that. It's different than like picking up a preference. We're talking about physiology, biology, the biology of the human.
Yeah, and it's a conversation we'd have to get into by itself, simply because there's a lot of things I kind of have there too. Like just one example is I've always asked solidly straight males if they were capable of recognizing attraction in another male. I virtually always get yes. That's a pretty interesting thing to think about, right? Because it means you can see what qualities the opposite sex might find sexually attractive.
Being able to see like a male as handsome and having a physical reaction to it are two different things, right? Like, so you can ask that question and somebody like me can say, yeah, I can see like a dude can be hot, but I don't have that physical attraction to him.
Right. No, and I totally grant that, and that's why I say I should kind of just stop there, because it's a whole
that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
One that I would have with you at some point.
And I think it'd be a good one, and I think it's an interesting thing because, mainly because I think if it is something I ever get to propagate, it is probably going to be relatively controversial on both ends. I think both sides of the aisle would not be particularly happy with what I just said, but nonetheless, that tends to be the case with a lot of hypotheses. Doesn't necessarily mean they're right or wrong.
I probably pissed off a couple of atheists with the whole Christian nation thing,
right? But so the reason though I do want to bring up bring up the not born that way thing, right? Is because I do think that there is a fundamental difference between discriminating against people for their practices and discriminating against people for what they are. But you gave a good example to account for that, so now let's address that, which is Trump, right? If I decided to not let Trump voters into my place of business, number one, do believe you have that right. I think you're going to crash your business if you do. I think it's a very dumb thing to do. But I do think if you own the property,
especially where we're located,
right? But I do think you have that liberty. I think that if it's your property, you're just like I would say you have every right to tell somebody who can and cannot enter your car, who can and cannot enter your house. I'd say
you think I should have that liberty, but do I have that liberty?
No, I don't think you do. I'm pretty sure in this country you cannot discriminate based on political associations or religious associations.
You can't.
And I even understand that, by the way. I understand some of the flaws in my own view. I just think that I think you get into dangerous territory when you start telling people what they can and can't think about people's practices, right? Now that being said, I do think there is a fundamental thing to point out with this guy in particular, which is that he was perfectly willing to service homosexuals. What he didn't want to service was a particular event, namely the gay marriage. And as a matter of consistency, it is important to point out the same person won't service Halloween events because of his Christian conviction as well, or service, other like a
but there's really no discrimination in not servicing Halloween, is there? Like, gay marriage being the issue, and that like I said, that was the issue in this recent Philadelphia ruling, and the Supreme Court came down on the side of the Catholic Adoption Agency. But the issue wasn't gay people; it was gay marriage. And again, it comes down to that gay marriage, and you're kind of making my point for me that it is Christians trying to suppress that this is something that Christians care about, and they want to make sure that this demographic of people don't have. Now, there's other demographics that we make sure don't have it either, but we're talking about that demographic, and there's pretty much one specific group that has always just not allowed that to happen. Thinking about it, if you were going to ask this Christian cake maker to make a dick cake, probably not tasteful, and could come up with, no, I'm not going to make a dick cake.
Right.
But the moment you say I'm against gay marriage, you're essentially saying I'm against gay people having the same, we'll call it privileges, since rights, that word isn't good here. That's where the issue is. And you're saying I can't do that to a Trumper, right? Like I can't say because you're this certain demographic, I can't discriminate against you. And that's the issue. Now, your side just got, in my opinion, a huge victory on the Supreme Court level here. So, current American constitutional law is siding with you. Again, that's the politics of the court. Trump played those politics really well.
So let me ask though, let's just say you owned, I don't know, you're in the food industry, so let's just say it's some kind of food business and you owned it and it's all yours, right? You're the head chef or sous chef or whatever. And somebody like myself, asks you to attend and, even cater a church banquet, right? For my own church, right? Like a fellowship for after the service, which is something that frequently happens. Typically we do potlucks, but let's just say in this particular example, we wanted it to be catered. Do you believe you have a right to say, well, I apologize. You're totally welcome to come into this restaurant, but I don't want to go out of my way to be designing certain things, in a, catering style way because I disagree with that lifestyle. Do you think you have that right?
I mean, it's nuanced question. So I would think, again, it would be a bad business practice to do that. I mean, primarily all of your customers are going to be religious or have some kind of religious affiliation. I would say probably not, just based on the same reasoning. I know, race and gender, sexuality are different things, but we saw the ramifications of what that can do, and the segregations that mode of thinking can lead to, and I don't want to see that return to America. So, if it would affect me in a negative way to where I couldn't refuse a Christian service, yeah, I think that I shouldn't be able to really refuse that Christian service. Now, I could do it in my own way, and that Christian service might not like it my way and fire me. And I think I would be within my rights to do that. But you would probably face backlash and ramifications for that action. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction, So yeah, I would say, just trying to speak honestly, and if this were to apply to me, like if I were to somehow have to go against what I believe in to make sure I'm not discriminating against a group of people, and society deems that I shouldn't be discriminating against that group of people, I would have to follow the law. So yeah, I would, yeah, I would say I should make myself available to do that.
Well, I do at least appreciate your consistency for sure. I would disagree, though. I believe you should have the right to say, and especially if you're willing to serve me anyways, right? If it's one of those things where it's like, hey, look, come into my restaurant, bring your whole congregation, do whatever you guys want to do amongst yourselves. I just simply don't want to be there catering the event itself and designing the things I design specifically for it. I think that you'd be well within your rights. Now it's
I would say I do think that people should have a right to abstain from events that they don't want to be a part of. So it's a very nuanced thing, and it's a hard question. I'm not gonna lie, because I'm sitting here thinking, and I gave you the answer I believe in. Mm-hmm. But then when I often give a freedom argument, and yeah, I don't think people should be forced to attend events that they don't want to attend. I would be against that.
So then going back to that baker, then that is his argument, right? He didn't want to. He told them you could get a cake here. You can, I'm totally down to do business with you guys. We can even deliver the cake. I mean, that's perfectly fine. We simply don't want to cater the event itself. With all the things that come with that.
Was it that though? Like, I thought it was like they didn't want to bake a cake.
Well, so it was catering, number one, and then number two, which is the other point I had brought up, designing a cake specifically for the event. So in other words,
that's different. Like the not attending the event, I'm good with that decision. Not baking a cake, I think that's the issue most of us have.
Yeah, and I can understand how there's a distinction there for sure. And it would be sort of the same thing, I guess, if to reverse it, if you were a cake maker who made these sort of artistic cakes and somebody wanted you to make a Jesus cross cake, that is, I guess, your own prerogative, really. But it's sort of, that's my point, I guess, is I would like it to be your own prerogative. Like, if the Rage decides, okay, I don't care that they're Christian and that they want me to do this, I'll do it anyway. I feel like you should have that right. And also, if you say, look, I find this to be an oppressive system. I don't agree with it. I just don't want to be making what is essentially art for it. I also think you should have that right. And I do understand that there is some level of, you can get into a dangerous place with that. Jim Crow obviously was, separate but equal is not a thing for sure. Mm-hmm. But if we can distinguish between what it is that you do, namely your practices, and what it is that you are, namely your indistinguishable, or not indistinguishable, but inherent traits, I think that is how we could go into a place where it's like, this is why this level of discrimination, if you wish to call it that, is permissible, whereas this level of discrimination, which certainly is not permissible. And I would agree it's a nuanced thing for sure, but I do think this Christian baker fits on the side of nuance where he is within his rights, personally at least.
Yeah, I'd say like not doing the event, I would hope that would be within their rights. Now, again, the cake, I'm like, depends on the context of it. Like, so if you're asking somebody to, like, I don't know, I use the dick cake, but like something even better than that. Like say you're a true Satan worshiper, not in the political sense, but like you actually worship the Christian version of Satan, and you have your goat sacrifices at midnight or whatever, and you come to a baker and you like, I want you to depict make me a cake of a human sacrifice. I would hope that baker wouldn't have to do that, right? Right. But then again, you get into that whole slippery slope argument. Who determines what's decent, what's not? Should people be able to allow themselves to determine that? And if they're allowed to to determine that. It could be just like, just like any cake, I can discriminate against these people. And then once you start allowing for the discrimination of certain sects, then we can, as you said, we can see the worst ramifications of that within our own history and the Jim Crow laws. So, I mean, I think that's ultimately really hard question to ask. And that's one that, I've actually talked about this case a couple times on the channel now. And it's always such a nuanced discussion that it's really hard to come down on a side either way once you're being truly honest about it and taking everything into account. It's very nuanced. But ultimately, I would say inclusiveness is where I would fall. And, if we're going to be an inclusive society, then sometimes you got to bite the bullet, and that means being inclusive to people that you don't like. I don't have the right to, I had a group of sovereign citizens, what I would consider to be very extreme, dangerous people coming to my restaurant. I couldn't kick them out just for being sovereign citizens. And I don't think I should be able to. As long as they're not causing a damn scene, I shouldn't be able to do that. Now, if they start we had this one table right here, and this other table over here, one of these people, the birthday person at that other table, obviously a gay man. This other table looks over and just starts calling him the derogatory F word, and you shouldn't be, and I want a different table. We kicked that person out. We didn't kick the gay man out. The moment that you start being bigoted, then I think that's where I as a manager, I can draw that line and say, okay, now it's time for you to go. But if you come in and you're not, I can't do that.
Well, and I do even agree with that for sure. Well, I guess sort of, right, in a sense, because obviously I have come down on the position that I am more on the side of the baker, right? But I see what you mean, definitely, because it is, and I don't want to pretend that this is an issue that has, a lot of times people will get so polarized on this that they'll just pretend that there is no logic behind the liberal side. I fully acknowledge that there is. And it's one of those things where, like, I just peeked at the live chat for a minute. Jen with one N brought up the case of somebody rejecting to make a cake with a swastika on it, right? And of course, that even in and of itself could be an interesting thing, right? Because the swastika, depending on who wants that cake, might not actually mean what you think it means, right?
True.
And of course that's even a whole discussion in and of itself, talking about like,
I mean, that symbol was around long before Hitler ever did what he did with it. Yeah. Definitely.
Well, yeah, and ironically enough, he likes to think that Germans were Aryans, but Aryan people are actually very brown. But anyways,
good point. Yeah.
I always found that hilarious. But at any rate, it is a certainly nuanced question. But I think my ultimate point just being that I really do want the government to be out of people's business so long as those people are not actively harming others. I would want you to just have that right to make that determination, right? Of like, I don't want a bigot in here, meaning somebody who's attacking my other customers, or I do, or I don't, want this group, but only if this group is acting in this certain way. And so on and so forth. I feel like it is a fundamental right for us to have, simply because I do very much fear the state's ability to coerce people. In fact, let me tell you something. One of the biggest reasons I disagree with the NIFB is because, God forbid they ever take over this country, me and you will be on the same chopping block. You know what I'm saying?
It'll be under his eye and, Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, we're talking like brutal ideologies, right? And I fully recognize, and even if we weren't on the same chopping block, even if they decided, CJ is fundamentalist enough, I still don't appreciate the fact that I can't have a conversation with Rage anymore, let alone the fact that he's actually going to die, right?
I'd be dead.
Right.
They'd have my head on the pike somewhere.
And the point just kind of, it's true, right? The point there being that's like, we're certainly not wanting to get to that point, but if that ends up being like the dominant ideology, right? And people are now forced to participate in that kind of an ideology, then you get to a point where you do actually get to that stage. Everybody is actually willing to bypass the fact that certain people have been executed at the hands of the state and stuff like that. And I'm not obviously saying that that's that like, it's like, oh, you're going to bake this cake, therefore now we get to execute Christians in the name of gay people. That's not what I'm saying, right? But I'm just saying that, like, I very much fear the state's ability to coerce people to go against their conscience. And I think that applies both ways. And in fact, I don't celebrate it as Apostates Day because I don't like apostasy. But I do celebrate on the same day a religious freedom, because I think it's very important. I personally like to call it Locke's Day because John Locke is the first philosopher to actually propagate religious freedom. Christian, ironically enough. But the point just kind of being, right, I think that is, I don't know, it's just something that I am very bothered by. Like, I've seen it in this country numerous times, right? We've seen Jewish people persecuted in this country. We've had arguably the most successful Holocaust of the last 500 years in this country, in regards to the Native Americans. Obviously, we've had in both North and South, the Lost Cause people like to point out Abraham Lincoln arresting people who sympathize with the South without trial. Totally true. But so did Jefferson Davis to the North, right? It's like, in both instances, you see people they're having their right to disagree even be violated by the state.
Yeah, well, I think that was one of the issues of the Civil War. If you're North and you sympathize with the South, then at that moment during that war, you would be considered a traitor or something like that.
That was Lincoln's logic for sure, and it's the same logic Woodrow Wilson used in World War I to arrest anti-war people at that point. But it is, and also the same logic, by the way, that Roosevelt used in internment of Japanese people. It is important to note, though, that we have had instances where we decided that was not going to be the case. For example, even Lincoln himself actually ended up coming on the side that he thought that reconciliation was better, and that he didn't want to see the Confederates as traitors.
I personally think that was a huge mistake on Lincoln's part, personally, but that's not the conversation we're having. But right. I think that was a huge mistake and what allowed white supremacy to live.
And certainly a lot of conversation to be had there for sure. But the point even just being that I think that the ability of the state, regardless of their rationale, to get people to actually go against their conscience, it can be brutal, right? Like both Davis and Lincoln operated concentration camps. That happened. Both the Allies and the Central Powers of World War I were imprisoning political dissidents. And those are extreme examples, of course, but the point is just like that's why I feel like this is such an important issue, is because I think it can get to that very easily.
Not start a dumpster fire, and we do need to end this somewhat soon.
Yeah, for sure.
But I would argue that here in recent history, I've gotten a lot of real arguments about this, that we've seen that in recent history with Trump's border policy. Trumpers hate the word concentration camp, but I can't think of anything else to call them.
Well, yeah, there is some nuance there. I think I do agree in the end. I in the end come down on the opinion that there should not be those camps operated. I think there's a little bit of rhetoric in it, but I do think that conservatives go the opposite direction too far. So I'm not gonna attack you for that by any stretch. And I will point out, something that, in fact, this is one I catch flack for tremendously. I'm actually leftist in regards to the Dakota Access Pipeline. I think it's a shame that that's something that is actually a partisan issue, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
And the reason I even bring that up is to say that because I personally don't like the term reservation. I prefer it depends on what era we're talking about. I prefer either concentration camp or ghetto. And I think that both of those things work. In modern day, they are ghettos, and in the past, they were concentration camps. I don't think that's the natives' fault. I think that's the United States government's fault. But nonetheless, I would
agree. Yeah, I've always hated the term reservation. It puts I don't know, like a nice polish on a horrible thing.
Well, yeah, exactly, right. And the reason to even bring it up now is right. It's one of those things where it's like, so you destroy these people, then you put them into a camp, then you convert the camp into basically a third world country where you buy off their political support, and then you won't even let them keep that. You have to build a pipeline through it. Like, are you kidding me? You know what I mean? And I had a actually huge 3-hour long rant on that when it happened, but it was over on Facebook. The point just being that, like, I freely acknowledge that there's, these camps and stuff like that have definitely happened. These people have been this way. And it's exactly why, right? Like, I just want to reiterate, like, I think that people really need to be skeptical of the state's ability to tell you what you can and can't say conscientiously, because it does lead to brutal places. Sometimes it's racist places like Native Americans. Sometimes it's ideological places like Jefferson Davis and Abraham Lincoln. But it's the same stuff. It's imprisonment and slaughter of human beings.
Well, yeah, it like when it comes, to bring it back to the conversation,
Yeah.
when it comes to what we were talking about with gay marriage, and that's the issue. It's these people want the same benefits in this one specific area, and it is primarily religion. It's a political party holding that back, or was holding that back, and both political parties was holding that back for the longest time. I mean, people associate this issue. Well, Democrats are for gay people, Republicans are against gay people. I mean, yeah, primarily now in the last 7 years, you could say Democrats are for gay people. That's a new thing. Right? Like, pretty much everybody was against gay people for the longest amount of time. And that's, kind of what I'm talking about with the suppression thing, is that when you have one group with a powerful lobby and one of our political parties on its side pushing against allowing this one group, because of their religious reasons, not to have these benefits, that's where oppression comes in. That's where the problem is. And that's kind of what I'm trying to relate. Like, and once you allow government to do that, that's the slippery slope. Once we allow government to say, no, you can't do this, that's the slippery slope that you're talking about. And it's not like atheists are on their side, on this side, like, I don't even know where I was trying to go there, but ultimately, what it is, oppression is a prolonged, let me read the definition: prolonged, cruel, or unjust treatment or control. And that is a form of control. That is a form of unjust treatment. That is prolonged cruelty over a course of a long period of time, to where now just recently they don't experience that as much, but it's still a fight. We're still fighting for this legally in this country.
Well, and I think I do want to get to the point of where we are winding down.
We're 3 hours in, and I've been talking, and I haven't really checked on my daughter. So I need to go do that.
Well, at least on my end, of course, right? But nonetheless, the last thing I guess that I would say is just that I do certainly agree that I don't want the state involved in those things, as I've said numerous times before, and I think that should apply to all different groups. But I have a difficult time with the rhetoric around everything, right? And I guess that is even my biggest problem is the rhetoric, like the idea that it's maybe the word. I like the fact that you were willing to grant privilege even if you don't believe it, because it does fit what I think is accurately being talked about very much. And so I appreciate you doing that. But nonetheless, I don't want to obviously get back into having us get on another 3-hour conversation. So
because we could literally do that.
No, for sure. And actually, this was a pretty awesome conversation in more ways than one. Number one, it got up to 26 people at its max, so that actually ties you with my interview with David Roll for my most viewed video live.
I went live right shortly before, just to let my audience know, hey, I'm going to be talking to CJ about this, so come check us out there. I put it on my Facebook. Yeah, I try. The last couple times we've done this, I've simulcasted, and I think that kind of affected the views you were getting here as we were doing it. So yeah, this time I didn't want to do that. I want to let you get your views, and then I'll mirror it and put it up in a couple weeks, and put it on my channel.
Yeah, and I do appreciate that. And also I appreciate the conversation itself, because despite even getting heated at some points, it was definitely a good conversation.
Yeah.
And it's an honest conversation, which is the point I want, meaning that, you know, both sides are saying what they truly believe, even despite the fact that the other side might absolutely disagree. I believe that it's absolutely sinful. You believe that it's absolutely fine. Who cares? And it's good for people to actually be honest about that kind of stuff, because you never get anywhere when it's like, well, you know, I guess it's not really sinful, or, well, you know, I guess I kind of, you know, either way.
Yeah.
It doesn't get anywhere.
Yeah. We both have our biases coming into the conversation, without a doubt. And that's why I really wanted to take, try to take it and put a historical significance on it, and just put a reality, practical emphasis on, the brutality that, yeah, sure, it's nowhere near as bad as it used to be, but still, even now today, like gay kids are getting beat up by straight kids just for being gay in high school. It happens all the time. Kids are getting kicked out of their houses because, their Christian parents don't want the gay child. These are still things that were happening today. So I wanted to take it to a practical, yes, you can think it's a sin, but we're talking about just oppression. We're not talking about whether or not it's a sin or not. What is oppression? Let's talk about it. And then, we can go from there. And I think I did get you to admit at least a little bit of oppression here. And I think that's a start. I'm good with that.
Well, and I think this has been a good conversation for sure. So I want everybody to definitely, I've been real quick. I have to say, I've been terrible with putting anything in the description at all. I have to go back and literally like re-add descriptions for probably my last month's worth of videos. So that's going to be interesting. But when I do get that, I will have a link to Rage's channel so that you guys who are not familiar, which I doubt is most of my fans, but some of them probably, will be able to go check him out and see everything that he's about as well. And this will certainly not be the last conversation that we have, Lord willing. So, one of those things where I want to just point that out. I appreciate the conversation. And
yeah, I do too. This was like one of the most, I would say, productive conversations I've had. Not that we budged either side, but we were able to have a cool. Yeah, we had our moments where we got heated. I think we were both trying to overtalk each other a couple moments, but it wasn't like animosity. Like I'm like, damn you, CJ, for thinking this, and you're like, fuck you, Ray. It wasn't nothing like that. And that's probably the first time in this conversation that it hasn't went to that place. So, I appreciate your honesty. And that's one thing that I do really appreciate about you, CJ, is you're a Christian. You don't run away from it. You don't try to argue, for anything else but your Christianity. And oftentimes I think Christians often don't defend their Christianity, and they try to take it to this general area. And you don't do that. You're a Christian, and you're willing to defend that shit to your last breath. I appreciate that about you.
Well, thank you very much. I do appreciate that, and likewise also, because it's a similar quality that you have in yourself, only with the atheism. So I appreciate it very much. So
yeah, I appreciate it. Man.
I want to say real briefly though, before we go, I have.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna take off. I'll let you do your housekeeping stuff. I'm gonna go check on my daughter.
Certainly.
Smoke a bowl. So thank you for the conversation, CJ. Yeah, like I enjoy these conversations. I like you, despite the fact that I don't like most people like you, and I think that says just something for your personality and the way that you're willing to have these conversations. I think it says a lot about your personality. So I appreciate the conversation, for not backing away from it, for having the conversation that we both agreed to, and being fair about it, and having an open conversation. So thank you to the chat. Y'all have a good day.
Absolutely, and thank you as well. And so that was the Raging Atheist Nakasuchi. Again, I will have a link to his channel in the description once I set up everything there. And I do also appreciate Rage for coming here and having honest conversations. That was actually one of the better conversations I've had with Rage. Not to say that I haven't had good conversations before, but it was just a particularly good conversation. So I want to point that out. I want to get to some of the channel housekeeping, though, so that we can go ahead and let you guys go as well. First off, I see more people here in the chat. Psalm 23 Apologetics. I think that's S.J. Thomason, right? If that is, shalom, sister. If not, shalom, whoever you are. I apologize. But I believe that if I remember correctly, that's S.J. Kelby Quayo, shalom to you as well. Glad to see you here. KCA says he's a new subscriber. That's cool. I believe you're an atheist, right, KCA? That's interesting. I appreciate you subscribing to me. Regardless if you're an atheist or not, I appreciate it. But if I just wanted to point that out. I feel like I've talked to you elsewhere. Yes, she says yes, it is SJ. Awesome, good to see you here. Hey, Love Nothing, good to see you here as well. Shalom. Appreciate all you guys being here. I want to go ahead and do my channel housekeeping, get everything here done. So got 3 debates coming up that I want to let you guys know about. So tomorrow I'm going to be debating Michael the Canadian Atheist at 1 o'clock my time, which is Mountain Time. So it's going to be 3 o'clock Eastern Time. We're going to be on Standing for Truth's channel. I know I've been over on Standing for Truth channel a couple times, but it's a cool debate channel, and I'm actually I consider SFT to be a brother in Christ. I think he's a very cool person. So I'll probably be on that channel frequently. In fact, we may or may not have something in the works here, but I don't want to spoil anything, so I'll just leave it there. Also coming up on the SFT channel, though we don't have necessarily a set date yet, I am going to be debating Smokey Saint on annihilationism. The question is whether or not the soul is conditionally immortal. That is, if we all agree to those, to that thesis. That's the thesis that I personally would want to debate. Smokey himself suggested is the soul immortal, and I wanted to add the word conditional because I obviously do believe the soul is immortal. I just believe it is conditionally immortal, meaning that it is conditional and based on whether or not you are saved. That debate, I believe, will be happening on the 7th or 8th of July on SFT's channel. It is important to note that while ordinarily I do believe this would be an in-house debate, I am thoroughly opposed to the quote-unquote ministry of Smokey Saint, and I don't want this to be considered an endorsement of any kind. I don't see this the same way as me debating Dr. Kenny Rhodes or Robert Rowe or other people like that. I'm not necessarily saying that Smokey is not a Christian per se. I am saying I absolutely categorically am not a fan of his ministry, and I want to make that clear. The reason I want to make that clear is because he is seemingly being accepted by everybody else again, and I have a really big problem with that, actually. But nonetheless, we are going to debate, and obviously it's going to be in a somewhat, a debate in and of itself is a confrontational thing, even if it's cordial. So that's why I agreed to do that. And then the last one, which is going to be on July the 1st over on The Gospel Truth, that is me versus Rob Rowe of Sentinel Apologetics. We're going to be debating whether or not the Bible teaches a literal global flood. I didn't actually say what I was debating Michael the Canadian Atheist on. It's why do you believe or disbelieve? But nonetheless, I'm going to be debating Rob Rowe on whether or not there was a global flood. He takes the position that there was not, but he takes the Persian Gulf flood position, which is basically the idea that there was a flood roughly 12,000 years ago that flooded what we now know as the Persian Gulf. And it would have taken out most of, if not all of humanity, but it would not have been a global event. This is why Hugh Ross, I think, takes this position as well. He uses the term universal flood, universal in that it flooded the entire human universe, quote unquote, but not global in the sense that it's the entire world. I take the global position, right? I think that the Bible is clear that it is a global flood. And so I'm going to be arguing that the Bible is clear that it is a global flood. So those are the 3 debates we have coming up. I appreciate you guys for wanting to check those out. If you do want to check them out, again, that's debate with Michael, the Canadian Atheist, who's actually in the live chat with us, over on SFTs tomorrow at 1 p.m. Mountain Time. We're going to be discussing whether or not or why we each believe or disbelieve. Then I'm going to be debating on July the 1st over on The Gospel Truth with Rob Rowe as to whether or not the Bible teaches a literal global flood. And then I'll be back on SFTs debating whether or not the Bible teaches conditional immortality of the soul, and that will be against Smokey Saint. So I appreciate you guys who want to check all those things out. I have some other things in the work, but they are not actually set in stone. So I'm not actually going to announce them yet. But nonetheless, those things are coming. I do want to say also one last thing, which is that I am going to have roughly this was the one of the 4 different homosexual themed episodes coming out in June. Again, it's a topical thing, so I want to continue to talk about it. And the 3 things in particular that I have left that I want to talk about, because we already addressed NIFB and we addressed the claim the word homosexual is never found in the Bible. Now we've had a conversation with somebody who opposes the position. And what I'd like to do now is I want to refute Idan Dershowitz's idea that Leviticus does not actually condemn homosexuality. I want to have a episode talking just simply about the idea of marriage in the Bible and what the Bible says about marriage. And then I also want to have a episode talking about kind of miscellaneous things. So the first being the concept of pride in the Bible, the second being the Noahic covenant, and the third being the rainbow that is, of course, a representative of the Noahic covenant. So those 3 episodes will be coming up soon within the month of June, because like I said, I want to keep it topical. After the month of June, we're going to be returning back to having a variety of topics, but want to let you guys know about that. Shalom, and thank you all for everything that you have said here today. For being here today, for watching this here today. I know that this probably made a lot of people angry because this is a very emotionally driven topic, but nonetheless, you watched it, so I appreciate you. Please consider liking, please consider sharing, please consider giving to our Patreon if you feel that I am worth it, if you feel led, if you feel that this content is content that deserves to be career worthy. I'll go ahead and drop the link to that in the Bible, or not, excuse me, not in the, I was reading a comment in the live chat link. I'll put a link to that in the Bible. That's ridiculous. My apologies. But nonetheless, thank you guys very much. And thank you for watching it, because that's the best single thing you can do for the algorithm. We're going to go ahead and end with a prayer, and then we're going to hop off. Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you for everything you blessed us with here today. I want to thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation, Lord. I pray that you just bless this conversation, Lord Jesus, and use it as a pursuit of truth for your kingdom and for the glorification of your name, Lord. I ask these things in Jesus Christ's name, and we give you the glory. Amen. Alrighty. So thank you guys again. Shalom. Please like, please share, please subscribe. I'll be with you probably tomorrow for a open room after show.